disappointed in every one of you.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend you.
I'm disappointed in every one of you.
I kiss you on the mouth.
No, I'm not cool with that. Just, I'm sorry.
One more time.
I'm disappointed in every one of you.
I mean, I'm dealing with degenerate animals.
I'm disappointed in everyone.
Yo.
Disappointed in everyone of you.
All right, come on.
Honestly, I can't do it no more.
I'm disappointed in everyone.
Let me tell you why.
It's gonna be all right, Nicky. Go ahead, shoot.
Let's just kill those fucking men.
What are you going to do about it?
You're happy because you got nothing. You don't got a thing. You're happy because you got nothing. You got nothing.
I want to get out. I want to get out of this rat hole. I want to get online. I need
BDA boxing.
Well, welcome everybody to the Boxing Podcast, broadcasting to you live from the True North. It's a good friend, Mr. BDA, and I'm glad that everybody could be on board for this one, fellas. In this episode, we've got a fantastic one for you as we continue on with our, what is it now, the third historical show of the last couple of weeks, and Chief is going to be joining us briefly, and we got a lot to talk about. Tomorrow we probably will be doing another regular show. There's a lot of news piling up, and you never know what's going to happen between now and tomorrow. So the plan is to do a show tomorrow, and I don't think there's any boxing on Friday, so we should be free. So that's that when it comes to that. But before we continue, let's give a big shout out to all of our membership program members, all of our members of the membership program. Shout out to you guys. Really appreciate you being on board. I also want to give a shout out to everybody who's on Patreon right now, subscribing. We're gonna, I keep saying, we got content coming in, and we've been slacking off a little bit with the content, but I'm trying to figure out a way to do this type of content to keep people entertained and maybe more podcast-oriented, just audio that people can put on in the background and they can listen to boxing, maybe old-timey boxing, sort of like the discussions we're going to be having today about past fights, past fighters, maybe fantasy matchups, and that sort of stuff. Now, the other thing that I want to bring up here is that, hold on a second. The other thing that I want to bring up is that, so shout out to the membership programs, membership program people, the people on the membership program, the Discord people. Shout out to all of you guys. Don't forget, if you want to donate a couple of shekels our way, you can do it via the Buy Me a Coffee app. There's a link in the description below. You can also, like I said, join the Discord, the membership program. That way you get more bang for your buck. But the most important thing is you continue to like and you subscribe and you spread that BDA gospel, all right? And let's give a big shout out to everyone in the chat here. Rampax Trucking Company, 10-4, one of the initiated. Dark Hay Dog, another one of the initiated. Shout out to him. Grim Reaper, more BDC, Iron Fist, Chet Collins, Jaime Raiden, and many more people to come. I'm sure, fellas, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. What else was I going to say about... I want to give a big shout out to everybody also who reposts and retweets these on Twitter. Steve Kim's been doing that, so shout out to the Kimster, K9, as it were. He's got a lot of nicknames. Team Batman Boxing too, Aratorius Boxing, HH, Haymanites. So shout out to all, and many more if I forgot anybody, because I haven't memorized the names there, but shout out to all of you guys for really helping us out here. And hopefully you guys enjoy this show here. Just a laid-back historical discussion about certain fights, certain fighters. On the docket, We got a couple of things going on. We're going to continue on our pound for pound discussion that we've had in the last 2 episodes, where we go back to the 1997 editions of Ring Magazine, and we continue that whole saga of who was pound for pound number 1, Jones, Whitaker, De La Hoya. We're going to focus on that first. I want to introduce a new subject because it came up earlier this week, a fantasy matchup between Oleksandr Usyk and long-reigning champion, heavyweight champion that is, Wladimir Klitschko. So we're going to focus on that. We're going to delve into the legend of Charley Burley, one of the most celebrated and talked about fighters, often referred to as the best fighter that never won a championship. He's also legendary because of the fact that a lot of people say Sugar Ray Robinson avoided him amongst other fighters. So we're gonna get into all of that. I also want to talk about Charlie. We already talked about that. Mary McGuigan, because I often talk about McGuigan as it pertains to the Hall of Fame standards. That is the International Boxing Hall of Fame standards. I want to talk about Barry McGuigan, what type of fighter he was, and I don't want people to think that I'm always just crapping on him. So I want to give him his props too for what he was able to achieve. I want to talk about British boxing too for a little bit there, just a little bit. I got a couple of subjects that I introduced there. Chief, shout out to Chief joining us here. I got a couple of new things I had on the docket, so we have enough to talk about just in case. I also want to revisit some, letters from Ring Magazine from the issues that I've been reading, and much, much more. So shout out to all of you for joining us. Hopefully you enjoy the show. And Chief, as always, thank you for jumping in here, man.
I love it when you invite me to these.
I mean, I do it under duress. You know how it is, but I don't want to piss you off. So, but
I know.
I'm kidding around, obviously here, but I'm sharing the screen with you here because I'm going to be posting things on the screen, maybe records, photographs, that type of stuff. So, Chief, I wanted to start off with a little something more contemporary because Paulie Malignaggi and Chris Algieri on the Pro Box show, along with Bradman Edwards, the current coach of certain fighters, I think former coach of Caleb Plant, I don't know if he's still with him, they were having a discussion about who would win between Oleksandr Usyk and Wladimir Klitschko. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the conversation, the debate that was going on the IBFP panel about who would win between Usyk and Lewis, that is Lennox Lewis. So now, over at Pro Box, they're talking about Wladimir Klitschko versus Oleksandr Usyk, 2 Ukrainians, 2 gold medalists. Chief, curious to get your thoughts.
Similar situation with Lennox Lewis. If you think about now, I don't think Wladimir would have given up a belt to avoid him, like I said about Lennox Lewis. But the reason why I said that, again, going on record, is the way Lewis did things when people tried to force his hand that he didn't like, he would just go the other direction. I don't think Wladimir would do such a thing. Mm-hmm. But questionable chin, the trouble with southpaws, the fact that Usyk's a little bit bigger than people realize, so the size difference is significant, but Usyk looks a lot smaller. He'd be the same size, about the same size, a little bit bigger than Evander Holyfield, actually. And he's a southpaw, a jabbing southpaw. And as I've said recently a lot, either within the chat or anytime I've been on air when we talked about certain people like Shakur Stevens, a jabbing southpaw is a tough man to beat.
That's right.
And Usyk has a very educated jab. They've been in the ring, at least training with each other before, so they know each other pretty well. And you can't take that aspect away from that in this fantasy matchup because they literally do know each other. So if Wladimir wins, it'd probably look very much like the Abrogviev fight, where he's bouncing up and down looking for an opening that Usyk's not going to give him. The difference is Usyk's not just going to sit in the corner and be defensive looking for one big overhand left to knock Klitschko out with. He's got a repertoire. And that repertoire is made to frustrate his opponent, if not to do more. And I can see him pulling off an upset against Wladimir. Vitali, maybe not, but Wladimir, yes. I can see an upset there.
Nice use of the word repertoire there. I like it. Now, I'm turning into Jimmy. Every time somebody brings up a word there, I have to point it out. You mentioned the height and the physical dimensions. Usyk is listed as 6 feet 3 inches tall. Klitschko is listed as 6 feet 6 inches tall with an 81-inch reach, whereas Usyk has a 78-inch reach. Now, I forgot to say before I asked you the question that Malignaggi and Chris Algieri were saying that they would pick Wladimir Klitschko to beat Usyk. I think one of them pointed out the fact that Tyson Fury had managed to give Usyk a little trouble in there, and therefore Wladimir Klitschko, especially a younger version, would probably do that and more. Now, they also brought up the issue of Vitali, and another factor involved here was the fact that Wladimir Klitschko is a super heavyweight, and that the size would indeed be a problem for Usyk. To your points, though, and I have to go back to what I said about Lewis versus Usyk, was that Lewis, despite being the bigger guy compared to Usyk, didn't really have that much drive in him to go get the fight or to go make it or to fight like a big guy. In fact, I pointed out the fact that Emmanuel Stewart often had to bark at him to go out there and finish the fight. Well, similar thing with Vladimir Klitschko. After he joined up with Emmanuel Stewart, and he started employing the dark arts, if you know what I mean, the clinching and the holding behind the head and so on. He became a very, after he got stopped, what was it, three times? By the time he got stopped by Lamont Brewster, right? That was the third stoppage loss. So he became a very safety-first fighter. And I don't know if, what I'm trying to get at here, Chief, is that if the long-range approach doesn't work against Usyk, what's plan B for Vladimir Klitschko? Turn it into a wrestling match? So, again, I don't want to put...
And depending on where they're at and who the referee's favoring. Now, in that case, I can see Vladimir possibly wearing down Usyk by holding behind the head if he's allowed to literally grab hold of that neck and kind of crank on it a little bit. Because that can wear a fighter down when a 240-pound man's cranking on your neck like that. In which case, later in the fight, he might have a better shot. But if we're going skill for skill, jab for jab, athleticism for athleticism, even though Vladimir's a better athlete than I think Usyk is, all-around athlete, the better boxing mind, the better fighting mind is Usyk. And that's just the reason why I can see him winning. Now, Vitali, on the other hand, may have some difficult moments, but down the stretch, he beats Usyk up. May not get a stoppage, but he'll beat him up.
Yeah, well, I think that's what they brought up too in that debate there, or a little discussion, that Vitali, although he lacked the one-punch knockout power of Vladimir Klitschko, nevertheless possessed a stout, sturdier chin is what I'm getting at here, and a little bit more resolve, and the volume punching really made it so that he could compete throughout 12 rounds, whereas Vladimir Klitschko had stamina issues. Now, I don't want to pedestalize here or mythologize, or what's the word, mythicize, or whatever. I don't want to sanctify Usyk and he's invincible, blah, blah, because let's face the facts. Fury was giving him hell in those first 6 rounds, and I understand it's because he was a much bigger guy, but let's not also forget that he never looked fully comfortable against Derek Chisora. So I'm not one of those people that's saying Usyk is invincible. He doesn't just show up and I'm gonna, I beat this guy and I'm at 50%. No, he has to redline it against these big heavyweights. So against Vladimir Klitschko, maybe I gave him the edge based on the heart and mental toughness that he has. But I don't think it would be easy. Now, if we want to go back to little data points that we might have here or there about how a fight would have gone, apparently these guys sparred. Johnny Nelson, former WBO cruiserweight titleist, said that he watched a sparring session and he says that Usyk got the better of Klitschko. And when they asked Vladimir Klitschko one time before the first Usyk-Joshua fight about how their sparring sessions has gone, he said it wasn't easy. Again, very cryptic. Not it wasn't easy could mean, well, I got the best of him, but it wasn't easy. Or, he got the best of me. I don't know. Again, very cryptic. And most of these guys at that level, they don't really want to talk too much about the sparring sessions. What happens in the gym stays in the gym. But again, it's very interesting to see that Usyk was already competing, at least in sparring, against big guys. And this is what I said too prior to the first Joshua fight. I said, look, Usyk has fought taller guys. It wasn't necessarily in the full-on pro ranks, but it did happen in the World Super, what do they call the World Boxing Series, which was like a half amateur, half pro. Yeah, and he beat Joy Joyce and what was the guy's name there from Australia or New Zealand? I forget his name. Big, tall. I think he was Maori or whatever he was. So he had experience against tall guys. It wasn't like he just jumped in from cruiserweight and was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. So there is that to be said. What else so you think Vitali would have been
Just look at his record at heavyweight against big guys. Forget the Chisora fight. I get that. He was just fighting there for the first time. You've got Joshua, who's 6'6". You got Fury, who's anywhere between 6'6" to 6'9", depending on who's measuring him and which one of his lovers or haters are doing the measuring. Either way you look at it, everybody that he's fought has been on the major level. And then who's Dubois? He's what, 6'5"?
Thereabouts, yeah.
Yeah, so almost 6'6". So everyone he's fought has been the height or taller than the 90s heavyweights. So, and heavier. So yeah, he can hold his own against the big guys. And there's a discussion going on in the chat of someone saying Foreman beats all these guys. No, Foreman, neither era of Foreman beats everybody we're talking about right now. Doesn't beat anybody we're talking about. He can land a big shot that Wladimir possibly doesn't see, and then he might win that one. But he doesn't beat Vitali. He doesn't beat Usyk. He doesn't beat Fury. He might beat Joshua. But the rest of these guys are too athletic. They could get him to wear himself out.
I think he could beat Dubois. I think he could outlast.
I would Dubois because I don't think Dubois is really a notable name, a quote-unquote champion of this era, even though he had for a little bit. And I don't disagree with you. And it's not to take anything away from Dubois, but I was talking about champions, and I don't think he quite fits that realm. A belt was dropped, and that's how he got a championship.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, look, George Foreman, the old George Foreman. I assume he's talking about old George Foreman. Very crafty with that crab defense of his, cross-arm defense, whatever you want to call it, and very tough too. I mean, he took some, he would fight in spurts, and that was enough for him to compete against guys like Holyfield, and obviously end up beating Moore. But you're right, though. We all talk about, man, he gave people a hard time, younger guys a hard time. Yeah, he was also getting outboxed by Michael Moore. And if Moore would have stayed sharp and probably had a competent trainer in there as opposed to having crazy eye steady Atlas, maybe he could have boxed his way to a decision. You never know. So, yeah, I think your point stands that some of these dudes might have been a little bit too athletic. And if they could stay away for all 12 rounds, that they know how to economize or how to fight properly and not blow their wad, I think a lot of these dudes can beat old George Foreman.
Well, I just got two words for everyone that talks about old George Foreman. Tommy Morrison. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, got outboxed. And did he ever have Morrison in trouble? I forget.
Around the fifth or sixth round, when Morrison usually has that, needs to grab that second wind, that's the closest he came to getting him in trouble. And if memory serves, Morrison held himself, kept his composure pretty well, and around the seventh or eighth round, got that second wind that he needed, and just kept boxing the rest of the night. I mean, you want to add four more words? I can add Alex Stewart and Axel Schultz.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
That's all the old George. So
which one's the one that made his that got dropped early or got hurt early and then ended up coming back and swelling Foreman's face up? Was that Alex Stewart?
Alex Stewart, and then Axel Schultz put a big mouse over the top of his eye.
Jeez.
So I mean, he swelled up in both fights. It was just he was almost unrecognizable against Alex Stewart.
Well, I want to give a big shout out to everybody in the chat for joining us here. Baron Evola, Grim Reaper, Morbid DC, ZJK, Timmy, and they got a lot to say. Morbid DC says Vladimir Klitschko title run is more impressive, in my opinion, than Larry Holmes's run. ZK says Fury is actually around 6 feet 8 inches tall. I don't know about that, because there was an infamous picture of him standing next to Magic Johnson, and Magic Johnson is listed as being 6'9", I think, and Fury looked particularly shorter.
That was also an angle shot where Johnson was closer to the camera. So I mean, I know that same picture because I forget his name, Anthony. Had it on his show one time, and he was using that as evidence. And it wasn't a picture of them standing side by side or back to back. The closer one to the camera was Magic Johnson, and so there was going to be a little bit of it's not a definitive picture of who was taller,
right?
Based off the camera.
No, you're right. It could have been. Yeah, it could have been. I'd have to pull up the photograph, but I think Thunderdome is who you're referring to. Yeah, I think he actually got into that.
My friend.
Hopefully he's doing all right. I talked to Jed Kyle, and he said that he's just taking a bit of a break from boxing. It's what he's been doing in the last couple of years. He disappears for a couple of months and comes back, then disappears. Hopefully we get to hear from him again.
Yeah.
Liam says, y'all only talking about 90s Foreman. LOL. Ever watch Prime Foreman? Well, I think we have. I'm pretty sure Chief has. But to the point of Prime Foreman is that Prime Foreman I would actually favor the younger guys of today even more so over a Prime Foreman, because he didn't know how to pace himself. Just watch the fucking Ali, the Rumble in the Jungle. And against Joe Frazier, well, he didn't need to pace himself all that much because Frazier was just running into his shot. So Yeah, we have watched Prime Foreman or Prime. I don't. You know what? That's interesting thing when you
Young.
Yeah, Jimmy Young too. Yeah, that's interesting thing about when you compare old fighters with their younger versions. Because I've said this before. Nonito Donaire, when he fought Naoya Inoue in the final of the 2019 bantamweight tournament, he wasn't as fast as he was in his prime. And his prime to me is 2007, 2013, where he was looking like a Filipino version of Roy Jones Jr. with that check left hook of his, just decimating people left and right with that. And even though that version didn't fight Inoue, the older version that fought Inoue was more experienced, had a better guard, knew how to walk down fighters a lot better, developed a good straight right. So it's almost like, it's like Hopkins too. 31-year-old Hopkins or 29-year-old Hopkins was more of a beast, more of a puncher than the older version, but the older version was smarter. So you pick your
Much
poison.
smarter.
Right, so you pick your poison. Which do you want? Do you want the foreman who's going to throw everything at you and see if you could weather the storm, or do you want the old foreman who obviously wasn't as intense, but nevertheless a little bit more wily and reserved?
Hey, I don't see him. I mean, if Jimmy Young can figure him out, and there's no disrespect to Jimmy Young, but if he's got the skills to figure him out, you're going to put him in against someone who, like Oleksandr Usyk, who I believe is bigger than Jimmy Young, and more cerebral, how he promotes, and a southpaw. Everybody keeps forgetting when we bring up certain fighters that are left-handed that one of the key factors is these fighters are left-handed.
That's right.
And that's not a normal stance. You're going to just walk in there and obliterate it because punches are going to be coming from different angles. So I'm not buying the fact that a young Foreman does better. I mean, against Wladimir, I would definitely give a younger Foreman a chance because he tends to swing kind of high. And even though we're talking about a young Foreman in this scenario, the old Foreman, the reason why he probably didn't catch Holyfield a little bit more was because he was swinging just a little bit over his head because Holyfield could duck a little bit and would bend those knees a tad bit. But now we're talking about 6'6" guy. He's not going to duck under those shots. His chin's going to be right there. So there's a possibility that a young Foreman could wing those same shots faster, and Vladimir may not have seen him, but that's the only way he wins. And if he doesn't get hurt, he probably gets beat up worse than what Ali did because Ali didn't bust his face up. Klitschko hit Chris Bird so hard that his shoulder blade popped, was flexing out of his back.
Yowza.
And then he chin so hard that his shoulder blade was flexing out of his back. Ali didn't have that kind of power. So older Foreman had a chin. Younger Foreman probably could have taken that too, but we don't know how much of it he would have wanted to take.
That's a good point. Shout out to Fu, the real Fu TV. Go check out his channel. He's been streaming the last couple of days. I'm a little bit miffed and angry that he hasn't shown up in the latest episodes over here, but nevertheless, go check out the real Fu TV. If you are hankering for some real Fu TV and you miss him, go check out his channel. He's been streaming lately. He's been appearing on camera too, which is kind of disconcerting because I like it when people don't come on camera. I like seeing them. I like maintaining a little bit of mystery, but nevertheless, shout out to Fu for being there. Owen Foster says, to be frank, that was the best Morrison we ever saw. Morrison actually properly trained for that bout and fought a more strategic fight than usual. Morrison was inconsistent, and was unpredictable. Chief, thoughts on that?
He's completely right. There's a documentary out on Morrison on how, you can kind of watch him through the years of looking like the football player into the bodybuilder back towards a person whose physique was kind of regressing. And they suggest the fact that the reason why it was regressing was he was like working out, but he was nonstop partying, so his body never had time to like heal and recuperate, and it showed in his physique. And if he would have actually dedicated himself to the sport, I don't know if he ever would have won a title or held it long, but I don't think some of his upset knockouts would have happened. I think he would have gone.
Chief, you still there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You cut off at the last word of your sentence. He would have, and then you cut off.
Oh, I think he might have gone a little further. Like when the belt started to disperse, I think he could have grabbed the belt and held it for a little bit. I think Michael Moore was a fight that he could have won. He might have lost. A rematch with Mercer, he might have been able to win if he were a little more disciplined. an old Bo because Bo wasn't fighting the way he should have or training the way he should have. But Lewis would have always outclassed him. Holyfield would have always outclassed him. If he would have landed to the body against Tyson, there's a what if there, but more likely Tyson knocks him out.
He beat an old George Foreman. I wonder if he could have beaten an old Larry Holmes too, the one that beat Ray Mercer. You gotta wonder.
Holmes had a chin, so I don't know.
You know where
Tony
Tommy
Morrison,
Morrison...
if you had a chin, he wore himself out trying to knock you out. That's what happened in the Mercer fight.
Interesting. Now, but where Tommy Morrison really went wrong was when he left Rocky. When he left him, he went over with the Duke. I mean, come on, that was a bad move there from Tommy Morrison. It was never the same afterwards. Chief, shout out to John Lucky's God, who says Shalom, Chief. Yeah, Shalom. He's saying Shalom. I wanted to
God bless you.
In the last two episodes, I've been going back to the Ring Magazine archives, and we've been continuing the discussion of who was the best pound-for-pound fighter in 1997, De La Hoya, Jones, or Whitaker. In the last issue we left off, De La Hoya had won a controversial decision over Pernell Whitaker, and it was controversial mainly because one of the scorecards was incredibly wide for the type of fight that we saw in the ring. Jones got upset by Montel Griffin by disqualification. Old Roy Jones just couldn't keep his hands to himself and ended up hitting Montel Griffin when he was down. So, in this issue, or in this episode, we go back to the September 1997 issue, where they're asking, who's the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world? De La Hoya already had 3 titles at 24. Jones was considered the best talented fighter in the world, and Whitaker, by virtue of his dossier, I know Chief doesn't like the word resume or CV, so I go with dossier, was considered undefeated by some hardcore boxing fans because he'd allegedly never really lost a fight. So I want to get down to the nitty-gritty of this article, and I want to introduce a point about pound-for-pound characteristics or ratings or the benchmark to be a pound-for-pound fighter. But before we do that, shout out to Virtuoso. Shout out to Virtuoso for his contribution with the Super Chat here. He says, if Ross Purity, Corey Saunders, and Lamont Brewster can have success in knocking out Vlad, then it shouldn't be an issue picking Usyk to stop Vlad. Sometimes Paluca Malignaggi doesn't know crap about boxing. Well, shout out to Virtuoso for his generous contribution with the Super Chat. Shout out to you, Virtuoso. I keep seeing him over at Do Dissidents. So shout out to Virtuoso, who's keeping sharp there with the socio-geopolitics, whatever you want to call it. But Chief, what do you make of Virtuoso's comment that if Purity, Saunders, and Lamont Brewster could do it, then surely Usyk could as well?
Well, the situation with Brewster that people seem to forget about was there was something weird with that fight when it comes time for the fact that he was having basically a diabetic attack in the middle of the ring because he had his pancreas was producing a lot of white blood. So this is Emmanuel Stewart said this on the Boxing Truth. He actually, and I was the one that asked him the question. So he actually talked about this. They had an unusual number of white blood cell count in the pancreas and a high level of insulin inside his body, and he wasn't a diabetic. So something was going wrong inside the ring. That's why he couldn't regulate himself. He was just
interesting.
And then when they went to compare his A sample to his B sample of blood and urine tests, the B samples had disappeared. Nevada State Athletic Commission lost them. Sorry,
which fight are you talking about? The Brewster or the Purity fight?
The Brewster.
Right. I've heard Thunderdome talk about that too. I think Dr. Margaret Goodman, didn't she have some official statements to make? I don't know if you recall that.
She tried to make it sound like nothing wrong happened, but I mean, when you don't have the B sample, then what's your excuse? When he gave one and you don't have it, then what's your excuse?
Well, that's a good question. I'll be right back, by the way, Chief. I drank too much tea before the show. I mistimed it. I'll be right back. You take over, please.
Gotcha. All right. So anyway, only in regard to the Brewster fight do I raise that question, because he was clearly winning that fight one-sidedly until he ran out of gas. Same with Ross Purity. He ran out of gas. But the reason why he ran out of gas against Brewster was chemical. We just don't know what caused the chemical breakdown. Purity, he was a 6'6", 220-pound, 21-year-old kid and didn't have any body fat on him and didn't know how to pace himself. A really experienced one, I still think Usyk can beat him, clearly. And I think the only way Vladimir wins a fight against Usyk is to hold too much, grab behind the head, crank on the neck, wear him down. In other words, not a clean fight. Skill for skill, I don't think he's going to have what it takes, because look what Sultan Obraguev was able to frustrate him with. And he was just looking to land one punch. Usyk's not going to do that. Usyk's hands are going to be busy. So I can see an upset happening if you view Wladimir as the favorite. But comparing him to like Ross Purity and, I'm not trying to make an excuse for Wladimir. Every loss in everybody's career is circumstantial. And in Vladimir's case is, Ross Purity, he was inexperienced and didn't pace himself, just like Tommy Morrison didn't pace himself against Ray Mercer. Mercer didn't win that fight because he outboxed and was just too powerful. Morrison was exhausted from throwing too many power shots for the first 4 rounds, wore himself out, and got taken out in the 5th or 6th. It wasn't the fact that Mercer overcame. Well, no, let me rephrase. He did overcome a lot of power shots. So let's not take that away from him. He survived that onslaught. But my point is the fact that the table turned because Morrison wore himself out, not because Mercer turned the tide with his boxing ability. So that being said, I'm trying to pull up that copy of Ring Magazine that we're about to go over right now. It's taking a long time to load.
Take your time.
Okay.
But can I?
Good.
Can I? To what you were saying about the Ross Purity fight, where he punched himself out. Wladimir Klitschko did. And then the Lemon Brewster fight, my initial thought was always, or impression was that, he'd also punched himself out, but you're saying that there might have been a legitimate excuse for that. And the Corey the Saunders fight, well, Corey Sanders could crack, just ask Hazim Rahman about that. And even Vitali got staggered. Yeah. I forget which round it was. So Corey Sanders could crack. But you bring up the good point about the Usyk thing, which is that Usyk's been fighting giants. And he handles his punching power well. Even when he's hurt, he doesn't panic. He doesn't. Whereas with Klitschko, Wladimir Klitschko, when he would get hit, you could see a spasm, and you could see his eyes light up. And it's like he just wasn't used to getting hit, which is amazing. Because how do you make it through the amateurs? Because it's one thing, I've always mentioned this. Brock Lesnar, by the time he got into the UFC, he started getting hit, and you could, same thing as Wladimir Klitschko, you could see something go off in his head, like, oh, I don't want to be here, because nobody had punched that dude in his life, probably. Who would go up against that monster? During college and high school, this guy was built like a fucking Neanderthal. But worse than a Neanderthal, because Neanderthals were short. This guy was shaped like a Neanderthal, but a tall one. So he'd never been punching probably never been punching his face. Whereas Wladimir Klitschko, he goes all those years through boxing. How did he never learn how to tame that instinct of, oh my God, I don't want to be here, and start, clutching and losing his stamina? It's I don't know what was something wrong with the dude.
I think it happened later, and I think it happened after the Sanders and the Brewster fight, because against Ray Mercer, he didn't panic. Against Monte Barrett, he was taking those punches. He was eating them like popcorn. He didn't. They didn't bother. Now Barrett's not a huge puncher, but he's a sharp puncher,
right?
And he was catching Vladimir with some shots. I mean, his win to knockout percentage is 57%. So it's not like he couldn't punch at all. I mean, out of 35 wins, he had 20 knockouts. So he, like I said, he wasn't a majorly powerful puncher, but he was a sharp guy. And Wladimir wasn't fazed by those shots. So he probably thought he could take a punch till he met Sanders. And then 2 fights later, he's like, okay, that was just a one shot. That was a one-off, and then he gets knocked out by Brewster also. And even though that wasn't due to the punches, it was due to the fact of him running out of gas. After that point in time, it looked like anytime he got caught with a really good shot, he kind of panicked a little bit against Sam Peter. Even though he maintained himself within the fight, when he was getting rocked with those shots that put him down in those 2 rounds, he only went down twice. In those 2 rounds he went down, though, he did look extremely uncomfortable and had to recompose himself, and it took him a while to reestablish himself. So I think that questioning, internal questioning came later. I don't think it was all those years of the amateurs that he was worried about taking shots, because I still remember how good he looked against Monte Barrett. That was on the Lennox Lewis Frames both on undercard, just leaping in with left hooks, and same with Derek Jefferson. Derek Jefferson didn't land anything huge, but what he did land didn't hurt Wladimir. Derek Jefferson could punch.
That's a good point. No, you know what? You bring up a very good point. And in fact, that Monty Barrett ended up, I think it was a couple of years later, but he did end up stopping the momentum of Dominic Guinn, who a lot of people had anointed as the next great. Back then, America was starving for an American heavyweight, and he was the guy that was supposedly was going to make that happen. And Monty Barrett stopped all of that. I think he even earned. I think that was the best month of his life, because I think he also won an all expenses paid vacation at the what was it, Wheel of Fortune or The Price is Right, one of those talk shows. So that was a good month for Monty Barrett right there. Now, The other thing I wanted to bring up here, Chief, is that, yeah, you're right, though. That's a good point. Vladimir Klitschko didn't really become a jittery Klitschko until after the his third stoppage loss was against Brewster. But I wanted to bring this up, too, then, going back. Did you manage to load up the Ring Magazine issue?
Yeah, I got the article of Jones, Whitaker, and De La Hoya up right now.
Right, okay. Well, you didn't really need to... Was that?
All right, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to say that, okay, so yeah, we continue this discussion, the saga of the 1997 pound for pound debate. And it's interesting because the article here was a poll. They were asking experts about who was the pound for pound #1 guy in the world. Wally Matthews said none of the top 3 guys did enough to claim the top spot. So they had very high, he had a very high mark there, or benchmark. Harold Letterman said Roy Jones. Now, for those of you that are unaware, Harold Letterman was always a big Roy Jones fan. I think they were actually friends too. And Letterman loved, more than anything, Roy Jones's shoe shining. Lost art. Everybody talks about infighting, body punching, the lost art. Now, the lost art is shoe shining. I think a lot of fast-handed guys could benefit from a little shoe shining here, steal some rounds. Even though I don't like it, but I'm just saying, Roy Jones was one of the last great shoe shiners. Russell Pell said he didn't favor any of them and suggested that Evander Holyfield might have earned the spot. If I'm correct here, Chief, maybe you could refresh my memory. Obviously, he'd beaten Tyson twice. Had he beaten Moore by the time March 1997 came along, or when was it?
We're about to find out because I don't have my years completely down. 97, November of 97 is when he beat Michael Moore, but he was coming off of those 2 Tyson fights. And he owned Tyson in both of them.
Uh-huh.
So steroids, headbutts aside, from FUTV. He beat Mike Tyson. He beat up the guy that was doing that to everybody else.
Right.
I mean, the one thing that people are leaving out when they're criticizing Holyfield so much about this are all the forearms that all the low blows, the hitting after the bell that Tyson had been doing to other people all these years, if they could slightly stand up to him at all. Holyfield did that all to him, and Tyson caved. So
the bully got bullied, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, if you really think he was intentionally headbutting, which that's a subject for another time, but going at him, and those clinches were mutual. Tyson was a mutual clincher. If you even tried to put a glove on him, he'd wrap an arm, he'd try and get a meat hook on you and walk you backwards, and he wouldn't fight his way out of the clinch. That's the biggest thing about it. Like, you'd think a fighter like him would, like, if one arm's tied up and an arm's free, he'd just wail away, but he didn't do that. And the proof is going all the way back to the Jesse Ferguson fight.
Mm-hmm.
When someone tried to tie him up, he never knew how to fight out of a clinch. Ever. No, people say it was a young Tyson. That's true. But then Bone Crusher Smith, no, hold on. Quick Tillis and Mitch Green both did the same thing. And then Bone Crusher Smith did it, and so did Tony Tucker. So he had a history of people going in and trying to smother or at least tie up one arm, but he never tried to fight his way out when one arm was free. That's just not what he did. So to say the fact that, like, one guy's clinching the whole time, Tyson never tried to work his way out of it. He never tried to defend himself against the clinch, number one, by flipping under when people are trying to grab him behind the head, which, a fighter of his head movement should be able to do, because Joe Frazier was good at doing it. And on top of that, when you did grab hold of him, it was almost like you were embracing into a prom dance. He'd just grab right hold with you and then, wait until the ref would say break. He wouldn't fight his way out.
Mm-hmm. Well, interesting little pointers there. I mean, then again, that was a Tyson who, I mean, if you read his biography there, he wasn't exactly in the post-prison sentence. He never really was the same ever again. But nevertheless, yeah, so Wally Matthews is saying that he would put... No, excuse me. Russell Pell said that Holyfield might have earned a spot as the best fighter in the world in 1997. Jeff Ryan, who was one of my favorites there over Ring Magazine, said the best fighter pound for pound is Ricardo Lopez. The only things Lopez can do, gain 42 pounds, and land an HBO contract, aren't his fault. He can box and punch, and he's made 19 defenses. Jones has had 2 consecutive mortal outings. De La Hoya lost to Whitaker, and sorry, Sweet Pea, but anyone who can punch isn't better than Ricardo Lopez. So Jeff Ryan always with some interesting takes, and the way he was very opinionated and didn't mince words. But a couple of things here, Chief, about that. Number one, Lopez at the time this was 1997. This was when Showtime was relegated to airing a lot of the Don King fights, right?
Yes.
So that's why Lopez. So Lopez didn't fight on HBO because I remember seeing him in the late 90s on the undercards of certain fighters. But I think that's when Don King finally was allowed to take his stable to HBO. So prior to that, Ricardo Lopez was only on Showtime. I don't recall that.
Yes.
Interesting.
Prior to that, because, like you said, when Trinidad and Holyfield came over under the Don King contracts, or I guess I don't know the business behind that. I think it was when his contract was up with Showtime. He came over. He brought his fighters over to HBO, and Ricardo Lopez came over during that time, and he was still an undercard fighter.
Right.
He wasn't a main event. He was always on the pay-per-views. But I think someone's got a question for you in the chat.
Oh boy.
BA-VH4RK. I don't know this person.
Oh, he's saying, what's the topic? The topic we're talking about, because in the last 2 episodes, we've been going back to Ring Magazine and the 1997 argument of, well, who is the best powerful fighter in the world? And it was between Whitaker, Jones, that's Roy Jones, obviously, and Oscar De La Hoya. So we're just continuing this because they did a poll on the, what did I say, August edition? Hold on, the September edition, right, of 1997 edition of Ring Magazine, and they're asking experts who they have as a pound-for-pound best, and somebody said, Jeff Ryan said that Ricardo Lopez should have been the number 1 pound-for-pound over De La Hoya, over Roy Jones, and over Whitaker. And that brings up the point here that I wanted to also highlight here, where he says, Jones has had 2 consecutive mortal outings. And I mean, I'm thinking, okay, you really want to dock points because he didn't look stellar against Mike McCollum? I can understand that. Then the DQ loss. De La Hoya lost to Whitaker. I mean, we were talked about in the last show that I think some people overdo it when they say that Whitaker got robbed. But then the last thing he said, where he says, sorry, Sweet Pea, anyone who can't punch isn't better than Ricardo Lopez. That brings up the point that of this era, Chief, the pound-for-pound debate, which is that some people, after Shakur Stevenson outpointed Teofimo Lopez, some people were ready to anoint him as a number 1 guy, but he can't really crack all that much. Now, I think people over-exaggerate his lack of punching power, but nevertheless, you saw against Teofimo Lopez, he showed a very tentative approach, didn't want to finish. In fact, Devin Haney brought this up over in the last Ring Magazine episode podcast, where he says, people chastise me for not finishing Brian Norman Jr., but then people praise Shakur Stevenson for it. I said, you know what? That's a good point. How much of the punching power thing and finishing fights, Chief, do you attribute or do you take into consideration when you're talking pound for pound top 3 spots?
Well, I mean, power thrills, as we've always said. And when someone really comes in and does something dynamic, like what Michael Nunn did to Simon Colombe back in late 80s, early 90s, that was a definitive statement that because everyone knew how good Colombe was, and Michael Nunn starched him in 1 round. And you're like, when that's something like that's done, you sit there and your jaw drops and you're like, that's a statement. There's no question about it. Mm-hmm. When you put on certain boxing exhibitions, like what Marlon Sterling did against Lloyd Hunnigan, you just counterpunch him all night, beat the crap out of him by swallowing his face shut. Okay, that's more of a boxing exhibition than it is a first-round dynamic knockout, but it's still a statement. He went out there and proved the point. But on the flip side, on a boxing one that was also devastating around that time, Donald Curry went in there and said, I'm going to show everyone who the best welterweight in the world is, and he destroyed Milton McCrory in 2 rounds. So the more devastating it is early, usually just it gets your attention. And when you're performing these virtuosos, as Larry Merchant would say, for all those people that thought that Larry Merchant hated Pernell Whitaker, he didn't. He loved him. What he got tired of was the fact that the Dubas were protecting him, and I've mentioned that in other episodes. So go back and to the archives and and listen up, because I went in detail about what happened. But after a while, when you're doing it against the guys that aren't De La Hoya, aren't Julio Cesar Chavez, aren't Felix Trinidad, aren't I Corte, who are all the best in your division, and you do them against Jake Rodriguez and guys like that, and when you're struggling against the number 10 contender who is a career junior welterweight in Dewey Bellis Hurtado, these virtuosos don't mean as much anymore. When you're doing it against Jorge Paez, who's a natural featherweight, but he's a big name at lightweight, that means something. But when Jake Rodriguez is on a losing streak and he hadn't been a champion over 2 years, and so you knock out Jake Rodriguez, who hasn't knocked him out in the past 3 years. You're not really making a statement anymore. and you're not separating yourself from the pack.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting, man.
Let me wrap up real quick like this. Whitaker got himself the number one position through a bad decision with Julio Cesar Chavez, and then they sat on it by fighting Cardona and Jake Rodriguez and guys like that. Gary Jacobs, I think was his name, was another one. None of these are memorable names. None of these are historical names. None of these are names that are going to, well, he's in the Hall of Fame, but they're not Hall of Fame worthy names.
Right.
He meaning Whitaker's in the Hall of Fame. In the meantime, De La Hoya's making a name for himself. Trinidad's making a name for himself. Roy Jones making a name for himself. Pound for pound is not a title you win in the ring and get to make various title defenses and keep it until you lose. You can lose it without losing a fight. And so why is Whitaker still considered number one, and what some people were asking, when you haven't fought anybody great, and when you did, as controversial as the fight was, at the end of the day, to De La Hoya, you still lost. By the way, you and Trinidad have been the same weight class and champions at the same time since 1993, and you still haven't fought yet.
Yeah.
This episode's 97. Whitaker won his title in March, and Felix won it in June, and they still haven't fought yet.
Yeah.
So these are the reasons why Purnell was moving down the list.
Yeah, Chief is, we covered that. I invite people to go back to the Purnell Whitaker episode, and Chavez, the Chavez one too. Chief mentions a lot there about why they never fought when they were at lightweight, junior welterweight. And he dismisses or dismantles rather a lot of some narratives that sometimes some people, not everybody, make about how nobody wanted to fight Whitaker. It's like, it's a little bit disingenuous right there. Now, yeah, Al Bernstein in this article says it's a difficult question talking about picking the best pound for pound fighter in 1997 because people keep falling by the wayside. I can't say De La Hoya after the Whitaker fight, which I thought Whitaker won. He says Whitaker gave a great performance, or at least a real good one, but he's only about 70% of the old Whitaker. The most unbeatable is probably Roy Jones, but I'd hate to make him number one pound for pound because there are a lot of skills missing, which was evident in the Montel Griffin fight. He doesn't use his jab. He's always looking for one shot to knock you out, and when he backs up, he does nothing. I wouldn't vote for anyone right now. I gotta tell you, man, in hindsight, they're talking about all-time greats there, and they're dismissing these guys as if they were not garbage, but they were mediocre fighters. It just goes to show you that you can never fully gauge a fighter until they're done with their careers. And back then, always, when you got a guy and their career is not even over yet and they're still just in their prime, you tend to sort of have very high standards for them. So this is essentially what was going on there in 1997. And by the way, Chief, we talked about that, about Roy Jones's unorthodox style and lack of fundamentals. And despite all of that, despite the fact that he used to slap a little bit with his shots, the fact that he didn't really jab that much, the fact that he didn't really know how to press a fighter once they showed up and went into defensive mode, I'd still be very reticent to pick almost anybody, or just about anybody against him. Even like, the best, the guy that most people consider the best light heavyweight of all time, Ezra Charles. I mean, I don't know. Roy Jones just had that ability to, with his incredible hand speed and power, he tended to make people recede into a shell. What do you think?
Well, let's look at who he made recede into a shell at light heavyweight. Name me a Hall of Fame name that he made a title defense against a light heavyweight.
Mm-hmm. Your point is well taken. Yeah,
Carver just recently got in, so I'll give him that. But he didn't fight Michael Nunn, who's in the Hall of Fame. He didn't fight Virgil Hill for a title fight. That was a last-minute replacement, and Hill was getting ready to start competing at at cruiserweight when that fight came in at the 11th hour because somebody had pulled out. I don't remember who, but a fight fell through, and so they had to do a meeting weight, and that's why it wasn't a title fight because Virgil Hill was not preparing to come back down to 175 pounds, and he had to lose a little bit more weight a little quickly. Now, did that weaken his rib? No. Roy Jones did that. Let's not take that away. But it wasn't a title defense. It wasn't a title fight at that. So his resume, as you will, or whatever word you used recently, record. That's another word people can use. At light heavyweight lacks anything definitively Hall of Fame name.
If you would have beaten Michalowski, would that have changed your mind a little bit? Would that have done?
Absolutely. Yeah, mine particularly, yes. Maybe I would have, if I'm truly a Roy Jones hater, I might have come up with an excuse. But since it didn't happen, and based off of the person I try to be unbiased, I'm not, but I try to be. then I would like to think that I could say, yeah, he beat everybody at light heavyweight.
It's a good point.
Me not being a huge fan of his, the other night I was seeing all these praise and accolades for how he was able to do things nobody else in the ring could do. Shows the fact that even though I didn't like his career and how he managed himself, I still know how to give credit to where credit's due of the fact that he was a highly impressive athletic talent and the only one I've ever seen like him. Because I haven't seen a lot of prime Ray Robinson. And even though I did watch Ray Leonard growing up, and as great as Ray Leonard was, he still wasn't the same. Roy was just a little different. And when I mean a little, I just say that because of how great Sugar Ray Leonard was, not because, Roy was definitely a much different athlete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely a very peculiar fighter with the overbearing talent and the outpour of talent, rather. And the fact that he, for a long time, he was deemed invincible, and then that fall of grace that rarely have I seen a fighter look so invincible for so many years, and then all of a sudden to go completely off the ramp there. But yeah, shout out to everybody who's in the chat joining us here: Strangeness, Timmy, Broaden Boxing, Food TV, Blue Tech, Baron Evola, Morbid BDC. Who else we got here? We got Liam, Baron Evola. I said Guerrero de la Info. Shout out to him, Grim Reaper. Who else we got here? Hold on. Yeah, Owen Foster. So shout out to you guys. Hopefully you guys, Parokua. Shout out to Parokua. Hopefully you guys enjoying the show. Well, now we move on to something that I've been meaning to get into. And for all the 8 years we've been on this show, I don't think we've ever brought this guy up. But if you've been in the forums for a long time, and if you've been talking about greatest fighters of all time and all that, this name surely has come up. Now, Chief, boxing fans, we love very few things more than talking about the dark horse, the boogeyman. The guy that nobody wants to fight right now. The guy that, hey, I knew about him before everybody else. You know what I mean? Like the Golovkin or Edwin Valero. And also that goes on into the history of the guys that never got their title shot, the best guys who never were, and the guys that were avoided by the best and so on. I mean, people love to talk about that. And the granddaddy of them all has to be Charley Burley, who competed between the welterweight and middleweight division, or actually went as far up as heavyweight. And there's a lot said about him. And for a while there, you read a little bit here and there about him, or you saw, Sugar Ray Robinson docked him, and even Henry Armstrong, some people say, docked him, and some of these light heavyweights too docked him. Nobody wanted to fight him, the middleweight champs. So I think it's a good episode here, a good opportunity to go into, well, who exactly was Charley Burley? And because again, I'm no expert, but I can only give you the basics. So maybe we can actually delve further into this and determine and ascertain just how good was he. Where does reality end and where does the legend begin? Chief, do you want to start with this one?
I'll go into what I knew about him to begin with, and then as things progressed with time learning about him. Very first time, it was either the ring top 50 fighters last 50 years, the last 80 years. These were 90s. Magazines that Ring Magazine did, and someone threw Charley Burley in there. I'm like, okay, so titles held none. I'm like, well, how good could this guy be? I didn't know about Black Murderers Row back then. So I read about the fact that it had all these skills and everything else. And then the key thing that I think cements it to people, because people just don't question this man's opinion, is Eddie Futch said, one of the finest fighters I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So when Eddie Futch says such a high compliment about a fighter, then obviously something's got to be there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the problem is there's only one film of him fighting Tommy somebody or another. I can't remember his name right now. I'll look it up in a second on YouTube. And it's a very choppy film. It's been restored a little bit here and there, but it doesn't show a lot. It's only one fight. I don't even remember how much of a contender this gentleman was that he fought, but he was a naturally bigger man. So it was a middleweight fighting a light heavyweight. So I got to give him props that were there. But the footage doesn't show this same skill level that people describe with Sugar Ray Robinson and everybody else. So you're left wondering, did we miss something by him not being filmed enough? Did we miss something else? Or was there a personal connection that Eddie Futch had with him that we don't know about, and he just really liked his style? Was there something that Eddie Futch, was there certain characteristics, meaning certain skill sets that he liked that Charley Burley did well? Because when you start to compare him against some of the other guys, I think one of the other members of Black Murderers Row was Lloyd somebody. I got to look that name up. Anyway, he doesn't have a winning record over that gentleman in that area.
Well, he beat a lot of the guys from just Chief is looking that up. Back in those days, a lot of guys didn't get their title shots, and some people claim it's because of racial division. So they had this thing called Murderers Row, which is where guys had never got their title shots, and there was guys like Coco Kid and Holman Williams, and I think the guy that you're talking about was I want to say Lloyd. No, it wasn't Lloyd Marshall. What was his name?
Yep, Lloyd Marshall beat him.
Yeah, and by the way, these are just names that, again, I keep hearing, so it's not like I'm an expert either on these guys, but apparently if you were good enough to beat most of these dudes, you were as good as the champ, because these were the guys that nobody really wanted to fight, and Charlie Burr had a pretty good record against those guys. I think he was like 11, because they fought like 4 or 5 times against each other, or thereabouts. So he actually came up on the winning end against most of these dudes, so that's one of the reasons why he's considered as one of the best to never win a title, because he did about as much as he could have without actually winning that title. He also had a win over Fritzy Zivik, before Zivik beat Henry Armstrong. And then there's a whole controversy about why he never actually got to beat Red. I forget the guy who ended up beating Henry Armstrong. Zivik thereafter. And then the war started. So there's a whole bunch of things also there that indicate that it wasn't just racism that got in the way. Actually, some people say it was naivete, that he didn't really know how to play the game with the people who control boxing. Other people say that he was boring. We're going to get into that. But that was the thing, though. So he fought the guys that nobody else wanted to fight, because he was one of those guys. And like I said, the legend is sort of a little bit. It grows from the fact that shit. What the fuck happened here? Okay, the legend grows from the fact that not a lot of people. There's not a lot of film out there of him. But yeah, Chief, what were you gonna say? Was you were talking about the Black Murderers Row and Lloyd Marshall?
Yes.
Yeah.
Lloyd Marshall was known as a really good fighter, also that couldn't get a shot. And he doesn't have a winning record over Lloyd Marshall. And I don't remember him having many, if any, wins over Jimmy Bivens, another guy who didn't get a title shot. Mm-hmm. So of this legacy, based off of what most of us today know about him, because of a compliment made by Eddie Fudge,
right,
we don't have much else to go on other than there's some admiration towards him, but there's nothing to really, without further documentation. Now, as much as I love boxing, there's people out there that do much more research than myself. And so there's probably people that do know way more about this subject than I do. And I'm not going to claim to be the expert on it. I know enough about him, and I'm a boxer warrior on this part more than I am an actual historian. I'm going to make that disclaimer.
Right.
But based off of the people that he fought, based off of the other people, the ones he did fight within that realm of Black Murderers Row, and the two that were not part of that were until later in their career, which is Desert Charles and Archie Moore, because they eventually got title shots, and won those titles. So that took them out of Black Murderers Row. He doesn't beat those guys. So was it just because he was better than a lot of the white contenders? Or is it the fact that he really wasn't as great as some people try to run with on this? And I don't have answers to that. I just know the fact that against the competition of the other people that were blackballed, he didn't beat all of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I brought up the fact that and I forget how the line goes, like where does reality end and the legend begin? Or I don't know if it's the reverse, but yeah, it's true. That's why it's such a compelling subject, because you keep hearing the name Charley Burley, and ever since the advent of the internet, people have made videos about him. The guy nobody wanted to fight, the guy Sugar Ray Robinson avoided. But just to give a little bit more info on Charley Burley, in the 100 Best Punchers Ever edition of Ring Magazine, they listed him as, forget the exact number, I should have looked it up, but he's in there, so he could crack.
Yeah.
He was known as a slick fighter, so he seems to have been the complete and total package. On top of the accolades he's received, I think Ray Arcel also praised him as saying he was one of the finest boxers he'd ever seen. So that's Ray Arcel and Eddie Fudge, two of the best trainers of all time. Archie Moore fought him, and it wasn't exactly, people say, oh, was Charlie Burr just that much more experienced? No, they'd actually been boxing for about the same amount of time. And that was Charley Burley moving up in weight, because at welterweight, nobody wanted to fight him, allegedly. And he ended up dropping Archie Moore a bunch of times, and Archie Moore thereafter said that he was the best guy he'd ever fought. I think he said something along the lines of as slippery as grease and twice, or something like that. Like, he said that the guy was very difficult to hit and the best fighter he'd ever fought. And that's coming from Archie Moore, who fought Ezra Charles, 2-3 times, Joey Maxim, Muhammad Ali, Rocky Marciano. So, yeah, that's high praise indeed. But we're going to get to that, about how much of that is legend and how much of that is a fighter's personal opinion. But, Chief, yeah, you went to, I don't know if you were done there with the, what you were talking about.
You mentioned about a phrase, and what I remember best is, I forget what movie it comes from, but it was directed by John Ford back in the day. When the legend becomes truth, print the legend.
That's a good one.
So I'm not saying that my mystical takes of not knowing everything, how good was he really not that good, is on point at all. What I'm saying is the fact that because some people are bandwagon hoppers, when someone, hey, this is Charley Burley, let's write something about him. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What are you gonna write? What are we saying about him? What do we really have tangible that we can print about him other than people's word and things like that? Now, do I believe he was a difficult fighter to fight? Yes, I do, because the only film we have of him against that one light heavyweight, he fought with a lot of his weight off the back foot. It was like a Philly shell in progress, because it wasn't a tight defense like Tony and Floyd like to do, because the left hand was out and wide, and it was used to bring up the parry, and he slapped wide with that hook a lot when they'd step in too much. And he could crack with the right pretty well. His record showed that, and he caught the guy with some good right hands. But I noticed him like bouncing back, staying out of the way. He didn't look like he was using side movement and lateral movement. Definitely tried to make it to where the bigger man, because he was fighting a taller light heavyweight, would lean in and overextend and reach so he could counter.
Mm-hmm.
So it does show a high boxing IQ. He knew enough to where I can't stay on the line because this guy might catch me. He's a bigger man than me. So in order to beat him, because I have a reach disadvantage, I've got to make him reach for me. So I have to stand in a stance that's going to make him be off balance so I can counter. So it wasn't like he was an idiot. I can see the intelligence and how he fought. The style was not very pleasing from the only footage I have of him. So was he too good to get these fights? I don't know. Was he too good for like Jake LaMotta and those guys to fight him? Possibly, but not Jake LaMotta, because he fought Ray Robinson all those times.
Right.
But was he too good for someone like Rocky Graziano or Tony Zale or Fritzy Zivic to put the title on the line, since he'd already lost to him in a non-title fight? There may be truth to that. It does make sense. And if he couldn't sell very well, if they put him on and every time he was in an arena there were vacant seats, then no, they're not going to give him a title shot,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not going to make money off of him. He's not going to sell.
Well, it makes you wonder.
He's going to. So you got to make money at the end of the day, and I don't like that part of it's a business. I understand that. I don't like that. But the bottom line is, if they don't make money, you're not going to use them.
Right, and it makes you wonder. I mean, was he a boring fighter because that was just his disposition, or because he was fighting bigger guys when nobody else wanted to fight him, and therefore wasn't knocking out as many people as he could have had he stayed at welterweight? I mean, that's something I'd like to ask an expert about. And the other thing is, well, first of all, shout out to Nicholas Gyros. Shout out to Nicholas R. Gyros for his contribution with the super chat. He says, "Are you turning on the fucking phone lines, mate?" Maybe later on. It's maybe, you know what? If you got something to say about Charley Burley or something to add about these subjects, I'll open up the phone lines, because maybe you can add something about the Burley myth and add something to it. Because again, there's a lot of things being said about him, and it's kind of hard to ascertain what is truth and what is fiction. And again, I'm gonna get my hands on a book about him one of these days, because I really want to really dive into it. As to your point there, Chief, about him, I just gotta remind people here about Charley Burley, because the legend, more than anything, it's about who didn't want to fight him or who didn't fight him. And Billy Conn allegedly is one of the guys that docked him. Obviously, Sugar Ray Robinson. Who else did we have here that supposedly docked him? Marcel Cerdan apparently, allegedly docked him. So there's a lot of names out there, a lot of big names, a lot of legends of people that didn't want to fight him. And that only aggrandizes the fighter, because, oh, those guys didn't want to fight him, so how good must he have been? Then there's legends that supposedly Sugar Ray Robinson watched him fight one day, and then I think it was Ray Arcelo. I forget whom brought up the fact that, hey, maybe you should fight him. And then Sugar Ray Robinson replied by saying, "I thought you were my friend." Meaning, why would you want me to fight this dude? So, but I don't know. But then again, I did go to Eastside Boxing, now known as Boxing 24, the forum, and there was a discussion about that, about, well, how much is true about what's said about Charley Burley. And they brought up the fact, Chief, that you just mentioned about him not being able to sell. Maybe people just didn't want to risk fighting this dude when he failed to attract people at the box office gate or at the gate. And then on top of that, he was very dangerous because he was quite slippery. So maybe people didn't want to take the risk.
And that's what happened to Vernon Forrest for a while when he was trying to get ranked. He got to a certain level of rankings towards the bottom of the top 10 and everything. And when he wanted to get up towards the top, fighters like Daryl Coley didn't want to fight him because since he wasn't a champion yet, the going rate to fighting Vernon Forrest was $50,000. Well, someone like Vernon Forrest has the talent of 100 to 250 or more grand to fight because it's going to be a fight and he's not going to be easy. So if you're going to fight him, they want money. And he didn't generate anything because he was like a lower level contender on the rankings. So no one's going to jump in the ring with him. So how does that relate back over to Charley Burley? If Charley Burley could even get ranked, because I'll be honest with you, I don't even remember how the rankings worked back in those days. Because I don't know if you had to pay someone to get in the rankings because boxing was controlled by less than savory people back then.
That is right.
What I do know is that if you didn't garner some attention, if people didn't have to come see you, if people weren't banging down the door saying, when can we see this guy fight again next? It was hard to make a living. Now, there was an article written about Charley Burley, and someone wrote the fact that he broke, poor, and destitute. And his wife wrote in saying, that's BS. We owned our house. We were not destitute. We lived time. And the editor wrote back saying, we were not aware of this. We're sorry. We did not try to, lay any insult. We apologize for our lack of research. I'm paraphrasing some of it, but the editor made a response to her letter and I don't remember what year it was, but she was not happy. She was saying that wasn't true, that he retired with his faculties, that they were not broke. They weren't destitute. He didn't blow all his money growing up apparently whatever he made in boxing, he made a living doing it to where they had a house. They had a respectable living according to his she's probably late wife by now, but back at the time, obviously she didn't write the letter from the grave. So at the time, she was stating the fact that some of what they wrote was not accurate on how his career ended.
Yeah, that's a good point right there. And because that's the other thing, I found the May 1983 edition of Ring Magazine, and I delved into the archives there to see if they had anything to say about Charley Burley, because that's the year he died. So it was a celebration of Charley Burley. So I was expecting a long article, with a lot of insight about, maybe dismissing some of the legend, but also pointing out certain things that made the legend. And of course, for every legend, there's a little bit of truth that kickstarts it. Unfortunately, it wasn't a very long article. It was mostly a little paragraph talking about how he ended up having to fight at one point a large heavyweight and ended up knocking him out. And then there was two letters that his manager or promoter, I forget which one, ended up writing to Ring Magazine back in the day, imploring the publication to do something about Charley Burley being left out in the cold as it regarded a title shot. So again, that's the only thing I could really find on Ring Magazine in the short time that we had here for this episode. But the other thing is, he did end up fighting Ezra Charles, and I think it was in Pennsylvania, which at the time was a burgeoning or a booming fight town, and he couldn't get past Ezra Charles. Now, again, that's not a knock on Charley Burley necessarily, because Ezra Charles, like I said, one of the best light heavyweights and an outstanding middleweight early in his career as well. So, but he couldn't get past Ezra Charles. Now, another guy, I think it was Double Chin or something like that. That was the guy's name on Boxing 24. He was trying to also add a little bit of sort of dismantle a little bit the Burley legend and saying, well, look, there's been plenty of fighters out there who were very good and never managed to win a title. And it's not because they were blackballed. It's just because due to certain circumstances, they could never actually get there. And he said Charley Burley, if you look at his record, lost a whole bunch of fights every now and then. And he says now that was the norm back then. There was no such thing as now as an undefeated guy. And if there was, it was very rare, like Willie Pep, who at one point went undefeated I think it was Sugar Robinson, went undefeated for a long time. But that was exceptional back then. In the old days, you fought 7 times a year, and you would drop one here, then you got a shot at the guy again, and you beat him up in the rematch, and so on and so forth. So, but the guy was essentially saying that, look, Charley Burley had a long career, he had over 100 fights, and he never got a title shot. Maybe that had something to do with him as a fighter. That's what the guy was suggesting. And like Chief said, maybe it was because he wasn't an attraction and nobody wanted to really take a chance on him. Maybe he didn't know how to play the game with the less than savory elements of the boxing world at that time. Or maybe he just wasn't as great as people make him out to be. Again, we don't have a lot of footage on him. I know there's a lot of people out there who hunt down footage. You know, we've been talking about, in the last episode, we talked about lost media and some of the fights that we'd love to get our hands on that may exist or may not exist, or maybe people don't know that actually footage is out there. But, you know, as far as we know, it's non-existent. So those are the type of things that maybe in a museum somewhere there's more footage of Charley Burley, or maybe in a private collection, but difficult to ascertain. And also, the other thing they were saying about Charley Burley was that that double chin guy was bringing up the fact that, well, David Tua got a bunch of title shots too, but he never won one. But you can't pedestalize or sanctify David Tua and say, wow, if he was fighting today, he would get... No, because the guy brought up David Tua, but then somebody brought up the fact that, well, David Tua did get his title shot, and he showed that he wasn't as good as that he wasn't that good because he could never get past Lewis, and he could never get past some of the other guys that he fought. Chris Bird, for example. So it's not a good comparison, somebody says. So I don't know where we fall in here with Charley Burley, Chief.
Well, I mean, again, Jimmy Bivens, he only fought him one time, and Jimmy Bivens' record at the end, and this is the Box Shark Warrior side of me, is 86-25, but he clearly beat Charley Burley. Could it be the fact that by the time people were starting to give him
props,
like notoriety and shots, he was losing to Archie Moore and Ezra Charles?
Well, did he lose to Archie Moore, or did he?
He might have beat Moore. I might have seen that in reverse, but I know he lost to Ezra Charles twice, and then he lost to Lloyd Marshall also.
Ooh, right.
And so, and this right around his peak in the 40s. And okay, where's Archie? Because I know he fought him.
Yeah, well, Moore is the guy who famously said he got outpointed handedly by Burley. Burley dropped him a bunch of times, and that's what made Moore said that he was the best fighter, the finest fighter he'd ever fought.
I thought they fought twice. Apparently, I was wrong. They fought once, and he beat him.
But can I say something about that? So Charley Burley ended up retiring in the 1950s. Apparently, the story goes that he got tired of winning around, and that's why he retired. And to your point, Chief, about how the myth grew, apparently the guy Double Chin on the Boxing 24 forum was saying that it was only about a decade or so after Burley retired that's when the comments from Eddie Futch and Ray Arcel and Archie Moore came about. So it's almost like it was in a retrospective, but he says, well, how come nobody was really saying that back in the day? It's almost as if that right. So that was his argument for saying, well, maybe a little bit. And he brought up a good point too, that sometimes fighters will change their stories and their opinions. For example, he says that, and I don't know if this is true or not, that this is what the guy was saying in the forum, Double Chin. He was saying that at one point, Eddie Futch said that Riddick Bowe was the best heavyweight he'd ever worked with, if better than Ken Norton, Joe Frazier, some of these other guys. But then then when they asked him about the best guys he'd ever trained, he didn't bring up Riddick Bowe. So I don't know if it was his age at that point that was making Eddie Futch forget what he'd said, or maybe he was just, I don't know, because I'll tell you one last thing. When I read those Ring Magazine's Best I Ever Fought series, where they ask a fighter, well, who's the best puncher you ever fought? Who's the guy who had the best footwork of all your opponents, the hand speed, whatever, right? Sometimes these guys will bring up opponents that clearly didn't have the best footwork or the best hand speed or whatever, but it's the guys that they beat because they sort of want to aggrandize those wins and say, oh yeah, that dude was the best, he had the best footwork, or that guy was the smartest. Now, who am I to say or dismiss those opinions, right? Because they're the ones that fought him. Maybe they did think, oh, this guy's quite tricky or whatever. But sometimes you look at certain examples, and I don't have any off the top of my head, but I have to look back on them, and because there were clearly somewhere I would look at them and go, okay, come on, that can't be true. So is that a case?
I've got one.
Oh yeah, go ahead, please.
Oscar De La Hoya fought Ricardo Mayorga, Felix Trinidad, Shane Mosley, amongst others. Mm-hmm. But he says Arturo Gatti was the hardest puncher he faced.
Just repeat that.
He said that Arturo Gatti was the hardest puncher he faced.
Who said this? De La Hoya?
Yeah.
See,
maybe it was the strongest fight, like physically strongest. But what I remember is in the first round, Gotti was just starting to try and be a boxer again. Buddy McGirt had not become his trainer yet, but he's bouncing around a little bit and he's using his jab and he's looking rather well up until, and then he lands a really good hook that just knocks De La Hoya's head clean back that De La Hoya never saw coming. It's just the fact that De La Hoya was a much bigger guy and took a really good punch against that lesser welterweight that might have put a guy down, because we know Gotti can punch. He's not a hard puncher, but to call him over Felix Trinidad, Shane Mosley, and Ricardo Mayorga and guys like that, the strongest puncher or biggest puncher, or I forget what he said, but in those he gave Arturo Gotti a lot of props for either physical strength or punching power, and the best I ever faced. And we know that Gotti's not the best puncher he faced at welterweight, but he did crack him with a heck of a left hook that he never saw coming, and that's one of the punches that registered with him for his entire career. So perspective is a funny thing, and when we're not around to see any and all of this kind of stuff that happened with Charley Burley, there's someone that I knew that said that they interviewed on a low level, Emmanuel Stewart, and said, if you think Floyd Jr. is special, you should have seen Floyd Sr. when he was young. Or something along those lines. Emmanuel Stewart made some kind of comment. Now, I know the person pretty well, so he claims that he did an interview. I think he's full of crap that Emmanuel Stewart ever said that, but people say certain things sometimes in a moment that's reflective of when they're asked that question. Right. And sometimes it's 100% like, I'll die on this hill, and sometimes it's an instinctive of like, this is the thing that's on top of mind right now. If anyone's listened to me long enough, I've had a few times where I've gone back and forth on some topics before myself. So the fact that Ray Arcel and Eddie Futch said such high praise about him, they may have trained guys or trained with guys that fought Charley Burley and had a hard time coming up with a style to beat him. Maybe that's where that came from. I don't have this evidence of everything about him, but again, like your double chin guy says, no one was writing all these high praises of when's he going to get a title shot and everything else like that while he was fighting. It was after he retired that this retrospect started coming into play. And I'm not playing him down as if he wasn't skilled. I noted his skill from the little bit of film that I saw. While in the ring with a guy that I don't know if he ever fought before, figured out he's too big for me, so I'm going to make a very awkward style to make him fall off balance, and avoid all of his fundamentals so I can beat him. And that's what happened. So he had a good boxing mind. I just don't know if he's quite as legendary as the legend really makes it out to be, because when he did step up against other top guys that didn't want to get, because let's face it, Ezra Charles was in Black Murderers Row till he went to heavyweight. He couldn't get a title shot at light heavyweight. So other guys that were on that list, he couldn't beat. Lloyd Marshall, Ezra Charles. And now they may have been the cream of the crop, but no one's calling those guys. Well, they're calling Ezra Charles a great light heavyweight that never won the title, but no one's calling Lloyd Marshall this best fighter they ever saw, even though everyone notes the fact that he was a very skilled, solid fighter. No one's calling him the best fighter they'd ever seen. But he could Charley Burley. So,
yeah, I guess, maybe in the afterlife, we'll get to see that fight. Maybe if that's one of the rewards of paradise, maybe those guys are already doing it in the afterlife. Maybe they've fought 60 times by now. By the way, shout out to...
If I'm wrong about any of this and anybody knows anything, please call, send us a DM for Discord or something like that. It's not like BDA and I are just trying to play anything down. If you've got knowledge we don't know, we would love to know about it. So,
absolutely, because we were just trying to introduce this subject here to hopefully to let people know about Charley Burley. But yeah, definitely would like to contact somebody who knows more and get to the nitty-gritty of this legend. Shout out to everybody who's joining us on the chat here, listening to this show. It's another historical episode where we're talking about Charley Burley and trying to differentiate the reality from the myth. People were talking about Arturo Gatti that Chief brought up, and some people are saying, Timmy says, Gatti versus Ivan Robinson fights were epic. More BDC says Riddick Bowe was also a dirty fighter. Phil Miles says those Gatti and Robinson fights are sick. Yeah, the second one gets overlooked because of the first one, but the second one's pretty good too. Sean Rain says, damn, Jeff Left Hook Lacey should have been much more than a tomato can. Praise the original boxer clown from Mexico. God love boxing, fellas. I think he's talking about Madomedo Pais, the boxer clown. But yeah, hey, by the way, Jeff, I have an article here. Maybe we'll get to it if we have time, but this year marks the 20th anniversary of Joe Calzaghe beating up Jeff Lacey, and people look at that win now and go, well, nothing exceptional, because Jeff Left Hook Lacey didn't accomplish anything exceptional thereafter, but at the time it was considered a 60-40 fight or thereabouts in Jeff Lacey's favor. So maybe we'll get to talk about that either this episode or the next, because we do have a lot of things to get to. So shout out to more BDC, Sean Rain, Phil Miles, Timmy, and all the other guys listening out there right now. Chief, we're talking about Charley Burley, and like I said, he ended up being ranked as one of the top 100 punchers of all time, which is high praise indeed. I mean, of all the boxers who have competed since the turn of the 20th century in professional boxing, you gotta be a pretty good puncher. And people look at his record and they go, well, 50 knockouts, that's not a lot. Well, I mean, 50 knockouts out of 80-something wins, that's all of a sudden the percentage becomes a lot better or a lot more favorable. But the thing I want to bring up here is that in that same edition where I was talking about the September 1997 edition, when we were talking about the pound-for-pound discussion, there was a guy by the name of Mike Silver who did a shorter version, because this is 1997, so this is 6 years before the actual best 100 punches of all time. He did one called the top 10 hardest punches of all time. But he had an interesting criteria. He said it's not about who punches harder on the machine, like a gauging machine or punch for punch. It's about credible opposition. That's one of his criteria. And on top of that, could the boxer carry the power across 12, 15 rounds? And some of the guys that he left out, I think Ruben Olivares, he left him out. I think Ernie Shavers, he left him out. And he left out Mike Tyson as well. So I said, this could be interesting for the show, because everybody loves Mike Tyson. Who hasn't heard of Mike Tyson? So this is what he said about Tyson. Why he was left out, he says. Tyson has been overrated, and his reputation based on knockouts over a bunch of tomato cans, a few second raiders, and one scared stiff Michael Spinks. When taken past the third or fourth round, he becomes frustrated and sloppy, and then comes a respite of a clinch. Remember his fights against Mitch Green, Tony Tucker, and Bone Crusher Smith? Which, by the way, Chief just brought up a couple of minutes ago. Tyson has the physical makeup and terrific punch of a great fighter, but the character of a schoolyard bully. What might have been doesn't count. He does not belong in the company of immortals. Chief, what do you think about that? Well, Chief is speechless.
No, I'm here.
No, you were left speechless a little bit.
Okay, yeah, that doesn't happen often. So,
all right, go ahead.
So when we talk about a bunch of tomato cans, because he fought so many times early, instead of fighting, 5 to 6 times a year, he fought almost 20 times the first year and 20 the second year, almost. 36-0 in 2 years. Or I'm exaggerating, but whatever his record was going into the Berbick fight, that was only the end of his second year as a pro. So to put that in perspective, so a lot of these quote unquote tomato cans were experienced fights, but instead of fighting them and spreading them out and slowly stepping up in skill, he fought a buttload of people within 2 years. Now, but I mean, was Marvis Frazier a tomato can, or was he just a guy that didn't make it? Was he a good fighter that didn't make it to the top? Mm-hmm. Jesse Ferguson, and not Pinklin Thomas, James the Quick Tillis, Mitch Green. Were these guys tomato cans, or were they fringe, lower level, like top 20 to top 15 fighters that he made his name against to get to the top? Now, what I'm trying to say is the fact, I don't know where all these guys were ranked. He did fight a lot of people nobody ever heard of before. Got it. But he also have to consider the fact that when Ray Mercer and George Foreman were fighting these guys, they were grown men. Tyson was 19. And he was blowing them out of the ring. And some of these were seasoned professionals. Donnie Long was a seasoned professional for the level they were at when they fought each other. He had, I think, around 19 wins. Tyson had 9. And all of Tyson's were by knockout. Most of them were in the first round. So who had more experience? Donnie Long had a lot more experience. What happened? Donnie Long didn't make it out of 2 rounds. I don't even think he made it out of the first. So, and Donnie Long was not just a 19-year-old kid. He was a grown man. Tyson knocked him out. So to say the fact he fought a bunch of tomato cans is kind of more of the revisionist history that Teddy Atlas tries to throw out there. Oh. And I'm not respect to Teddy Atlas. He knows Tyson's psyche, and I get that. But to try and discredit Mike Tyson as if he didn't accomplish really big things in a short amount of time for someone who was so young is disingenuous. Okay, is he an all-time great? He deserves to be mentioned with, I'll put it this way. When you start talking about Mike Tyson, you don't say that Michael Spinks ever would have beaten him. I know he knocked out Spinks, but I'm trying to get to something here.
Mm-hmm.
You don't say that Michael Moore would have beaten him. You don't say that Ray Mercer would have beaten him. You don't say that that the guy like Tim Witherspoon, no one's, even though he was a skilled fighter, no one says Tim Witherspoon would have beaten him. They say Muhammad Ali would beat him. Larry Holmes would beat him. Vladimir Klitschko would beat him. Vitali Klitschko would beat him. What am I doing? I'm naming people that are solid, all-time great, arguably top 10 heavyweights. I'm not naming, no one says Floyd Patterson would have beaten him.
Right.
No one says those guys would have beaten him. So he can't just be an overrated hype job if not just any no one says, very few people say Sonny Liston would have beaten him.
That's right.
And Sonny Liston's a really good heavyweight. He just didn't hold the title very long because Floyd Patterson wouldn't give him a title shot because of Customato. Customato wouldn't give him a title shot. He should have had the title for almost 4 years, but Customato wouldn't let him have that shot. So because of that, we didn't get to see him as a possible prime champion. Just because he didn't fight early doesn't mean that Charles definitely, not Charles, Liston definitely would have won.
Right.
But we're presuming he did because he blew him out when they did fight. So we're assuming the fact that he would have won the title 4 years earlier if he would have gotten the shot 4 years earlier. So the point I'm getting at is no one's saying that these guys, they're still significant, but not as long reigning or as dominant. Mm-hmm. Are the ones that are going to beat Mike Tyson. They're saying that all the dominant ones would beat him. Okay. But not many people say Riddick Bowe would beat him. And theoretically, Bowe wasn't really that dominant. Like he picked up the WBO and he was still tough to beat for a little bit when he got himself back on track for a little bit. But he won the title, had 2 self-defenses, lost to Holyfield, won a WBO, defended a few times, got beat up by Golota twice. That's Riddick Bowe's legacy. I mean, he beat Holyfield 2 out of 3. Maybe I overshadowed that part a little bit, and I didn't mean to do that. What I was trying to get at is, outside of Evander Holyfield, he did nothing great. Didn't fight Mercer, didn't fight Morrison, didn't fight Ruddock, didn't fight Tyson, didn't fight Lewis. So when you put things in perspective, very few people are saying that even Riddick Bowe would have beaten Mike Tyson. They're only saying that the all-time greats would have.
Well, in terms
if that's the case, be in the conversation with the all-time greats.
Yeah, in terms of impressive feats too, dropping out of the Marines after what, 2-3 days, that was impressive right there as well. But going back to the Mike Tyson thing, and you guys know I'm not a Mike Tyson devotee. I'm not one of the followers. I'm not one of those dudes that, oh yeah, he could have beaten, the only guy who could have stood up to him was Muhammad Ali. It's like, no. But this Mike Silver character, he brings up some points that first of all, it's true that he did knock out everybody and he didn't really exactly do it. But then again, that's because most people were terrified of him and they fought in a very cautious style. Now, he mentions the clinching. Again, I'd have to rewatch those fights, but I remember most of his opponents doing the clinching and not necessarily him. Now, I think Silver's point was that, well, he allowed the clinching because he had to rest because he couldn't fight with the same, he couldn't maintain the intensity past the 4th round. But you know me, I hate clinching, and so I always ask, well, how would these fights look if the referee actually did his job and started penalizing the clincher? Number 2, he says that his opposition was a bunch of tomato cans, second-raters, and a scared stiff Michael Spinks. I'm thinking, well, whose fault is that? That Michael Spinks was scared. I mean, that to me, that just goes to the conqueror's benefit. That boxing psychological. If you already got a guy beat before the fight, that's Michael Spinks' fault. And Spinks wasn't exactly terrified when he fought Larry Holmes twice. So
Exactly.
That was a weird argument there from Silver saying, well, he only knocked out a scared stiff Michael Spinks, so that doesn't count. Well, sorry, man, but if Spinks was scared shitless after having won a gold medal in the '76 Olympics and beating Holmes and unifying the light heavyweight championship, you got to give Mike Tyson a little credit for that one. So that was an interesting thing.
White Muhammad Kawi. So not just like any light heavyweight. He may not have been a dominant light heavyweight, but he was a buzzsaw and a tough man to beat. Mm-hmm. And Spinks had to dig deep in that fight, but he won that fight, and he won it handily. It was a competitive fight, but there was no doubt who the winner was when it was over. So the fact that he could stand up to Kawi, who is a tough customer, but he was intimidated by Mike Tyson, tells you how intimidating Mike Tyson was, because Kawi was an intimidating guy.
Mm-hmm. And tricky on top of
So, yeah. So, little short buzzsaw that could punch from all angles. And, you know, you might look at him from a distance and think he's not that much. You get right up on the guy and you see the fact that he might only be 2 feet tall, but he's 10 feet wide. You know, those, I'm not tall, so I'm not going to say that like that wouldn't bother me. But being slightly below average height, when I see someone that's like 5'5", 5'6", but their shoulders are broader than mine, and I do have kind of a stocky build, so if your shoulders are broader than mine, you're pretty freaking broad. That can still be intimidating for me to walk up on somebody like that. Now, I'm not 6'2" or 6'1" like Spinks was. Maybe that the height differential didn't make him look as wide. But, you know, when you little buzzsaw with no neck, the people like that are not usually someone that are, you know, pretty easy to look at. And I don't just mean aesthetically.
Well, remember George Foreman is the guy who said that Trinia was intimidated by the lawyer's wide shoulders. So might be something
But he
too.
wasn't.
Yeah. Well, that's what he said. So he was just one amongst the many.
I remember.
Yeah, just one amongst the many bizarre comments he made. By the way, Chief, check out because I was talking about the May 1993 edition of Ring Magazine where they talk about Charley Burley. Was that the one? Hold on.
May 93? Okay, I'm in 97.
Yeah, the May 1993 edition. They have remember the Ring Magazine did and I think they still do it, the New Faces feature where they talk about an upcoming fighter. Yeah. Daryl Coley's in there. Page 16 on the PDF versions, or not necessarily PDF, but online version. So check it out when you get the time. The other thing I wanted to bring up here. Okay, so we're talking about punchers. We're talking about guys that we don't know a whole lot about, and you know the legend grows and all that. There was one guy that I remember reading about in Ring Magazine, and this was in the 2000s, and I had to look him up because a couple of weeks ago, Chief, we had Nahir Albright held Frank Martin to a draw. Okay, and Nahir Albright, he's a guy that lost to Jermaine Ortiz a couple of years ago, but it was a good competitive fight. Then he had a no contest against Keyshawn Davis, who's red hot right now as a prospect. Initially, Davis had won a decision, but he got overturned because of he was smoking the devil's herb. Keyshawn Davis was, so he got turned into a no contest. But Nahir Albright gave him a very good fight, possibly one of Keyshawn Davis' toughest fights so far. And then he beat Kelvin Davis, who happened to be Keyshawn Davis' brother. And then now he ended up pulling off a draw against Frank Martin, so it was an upset of sorts. Then, about 2 weekends ago, what's his name again? Abel Ramos was able to pull off a win over an undefeated fighter. And it reminded me of the Gatekeepers, because Sergio Mora brought that term up, the Gatekeeper. And a Gatekeeper is a guy... Excuse me?
Those good old Gatekeepers.
Yeah, the good old Gatekeepers. Yeah, you need Gatekeepers to test these youngins and these contenders. And these are guys that aren't good enough to win or to get to the top spot in the division, but they usually give people hell. They usually have one attribute that continuously gives people trouble. And I remember reading about Curtis the Hatchman, or some people used to call him the Hatchet Man, Sheppard. You ever heard of this dude?
Not springing to my mind right away, no. So I'm not saying I haven't heard of him at all, but my memory is not really jumping with like, oh yeah, I know that guy.
Well, this is apropos. This name is apropos because we're talking about, I just brought up the journeyman thing or the gatekeeper thing, but also we're talking about big punchers and guys that most people have never heard of. Sheppard was born in Jackson, Florida, but fought mainly out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania back in the 1930s and 40s, which, again, hotbed of boxing. He's about 5 feet, 11 inches tall, and he fought in the light heavyweight division and sometimes in the heavyweight division. That's how these dudes used to do it back then. They used to fluctuate. You look at his record, nothing big of note, 52 wins, 33 losses, 34 knockouts. This dude is considered one of the most murderous punchers there ever were, and he's not in the ring top 100 best punchers of all time, mainly because maybe according to like Joe Silver guy, the Silver guy that I mentioned, his criteria, he definitely wouldn't fit in there, and probably that's why he wasn't mentioned. But this dude allegedly broke a man's collarbone once, according to Archie Moore. Archie Moore said, and by the way, Archie Moore fought him and beat him twice, but didn't exactly like it. I think he fought him twice, I believe. But anyway, he beat him all the times that he fought him and didn't particularly enjoy it. He said that he once saw Sheppard hit a guy. He was aiming for the neck and actually hit the guy in the collarbone and fractured it. He also broke Alf Brown's jaw in 1943, hospitalized Yancey Henry after knocking him out, and Henry never fought again. He's the only guy to have ever stopped Joey Maxim, future light heavyweight champion. He lost to Maxim the first time, then Maxim decided to fight him a second time as he was on his way to a title shot, and Sheppard ended up stopping him in the first round of their rematch. This was in March the 10th, 1943. I went back to the archives of Ring Magazine, couldn't find much other than that little blurb talking about the month's fights. And it said Joey Maxim, who was knocked out in a round by Curtis Sheppard and Buddy Walker. I mean, he's talking about two separate fights here. Felt the wrath of Lee Q. Murray's fists in the 6th round were dropped completely. So he's saying that both guys were dropped from the rankings because of those losses. That was the Ring Magazine Then in the Ring Magazine May 1943 issue, Archie Moore claims Sheppard was one of the hardest punchers. No, excuse me, I'm getting the dates mixed up here. So I think March the 10th, that's the issue where they talk about. No, excuse me, I'm getting all mixed up. March the 10th, 1943, that's the date where Sheppard knocked out Joey Maxim in the rematch. And the little blurb that I read, that's from Ring Magazine in the May 1943 issue. Now, like I said, Moore claimed that Sheppard was the hardest puncher he ever faced. Not Rocky Marciano, not Floyd Patterson, this dude. So again, it brings us back to what we were talking about, how sometimes a guy will say, well, this dude was the hardest puncher that I ever faced. No, actually, it was this guy. And we're left wondering, really, that guy? But apparently, Curtis Sheppard had that reputation. He also had the reputation of being a maniac, by the way, which, you know, they say God never makes mistakes. But I'm thinking if you're giving a psychopath fists of lead, then I think maybe old God might have missed the mark there by a little bit. But anyway, Sheppard was a hard puncher. But according to reports, he had little else in his toolbox. If he could knock you out, chances are you could outbox him. So he ended up on the losing end of fights against Joey Maxim, because Maxim did beat him in the rematch. And this is according to the Ring Magazine June 1943 issue, because I think if there's an article here from Gordon Cobbledick. I'm hoping that's a fake name, by the way. I hope that's an alias, who had written an article. Excuse me.
So that's quite a name.
That's quite a name indeed, man. I mean, I don't know if he's doing it to get. Had that name to gain attention, but he wrote an article called "The Fighter That Nobody Knows," and it was about Joey Maxim, and it mentions how Curtis Hatchetman Sheppard ended up stopping him in his own backyard. Or that is Joey Maxim's backyard. But then they ended up fighting a month later. Could you imagine that, Chief? This guy, Joey Maxim, gets knocked out. And apparently, according to reports, he got knocked out cold. And a month later, he's back in the ring with this dude. I mean, you see a lot of these dudes, they get knocked out and it's like, oh my God, what do I do? Is my career over? Am I ever going to be the same again? Fucking Joey Maxim, after a month later, gets back in the ring with this dude. And apparently, according to Ring Magazine...
Figured him out.
Well, that's a thing. Apparently, this Curtis Sheppard didn't have much in his repertoire. I was reading on Boxing 24, people were saying, because there's people who claim to have seen him fight, then some people claim to have seen actual film of him, even though there's none on YouTube, but they say that there's some in private collections. Apparently, there's a museum in California that has some footage of Sheppard fighting. But apparently, all he had was a big right hand, and he was a type of plodding fighter, and you could figure him out. Like I said, he ended up losing to Joey Maxim, twice to Archie Moore, twice to Jersey Joe Walcott, and 4 times to the aforementioned Jimmy Bivens. So I just wanted to bring up Curtis Sheppard because, yeah, sometimes there are guys out there that you've never heard of. And again, it's difficult to differentiate the legend from reality. But also there's guys out there who are truly dangerous gatekeepers. Darnell Boone in the last 20 years was one such guy. That guy could crack. Almost derailed Andrew Ward's career by dropping him hard back in 2005, I want to say. But by the way, long story short with Sheppard, he ended up allegedly murdering somebody, so he ended up going to jail, and there supposedly he found Jesus in there after running a gang in prison. And I don't even know if he's still alive or not. Chief, I found out there was an article too on Cyber Boxing Zone of a guy who allegedly met him in prison, and it was filled with wild stories about how you could hit Sheppard with a lead pipe over the head, and he would still come back at you and kill a guy. Allegedly had a hole in his head too because somebody had shot him in the streets and he had to take medication to avoid seizures. So again, if you thought Charley Burley's life was a legend, this dude's legend is even more so. Because again, there's no footage of the guy, so we don't know how good he was, but I just wanted to bring that up about good old Curtis, the Hatchman Sheppard. What else did I have here?
They had similar stories about what it was like. They said that when Sonny Liston was in prison and a fight would happen, all of the guards would come up and just hit him with their little nightsticks and right around the back of the neck, and he wouldn't go down. Yet Muhammad Ali slaps him with a shot that nobody sees, and he went down, and that was enough to win the heavyweight title.
Well, sometimes it's
you know,
sometimes it's a shot.
it's the shot you don't see.
Exactly.
Yeah, no matter how soft that shot is, it's the one you don't see. It's the one that doesn't land, that nobody sees, that never happened. No, I'm just joking. You can tell that a punch was thrown, and NBC used to do these little document shows where they'd have a panel of people, and Archie Moore was on, so was Angelo Dundee. Of course, his opinion is slanted on this, but Eddie Futch was on it too, and on the panel also. And you could actually see the fact, like, Liston's head goes back a little bit from that shot. So, I mean, it was obviously enough that something landed. I just don't think it was enough for him to go down and stay down. Well, the fact he didn't stay down, he got up and they started fighting again. And then Jersey Joe Walcott, good commissioner, good fighter, bad referee, went over to the timekeeper and said it's already been 10 seconds, so waved the fight off. So
boxing is a crazy sport, man.
Nobody remembers that's what the history is.
Right.
So big shot happens, a lot of flashes go down, Liston goes down, Ali stands over him, doesn't go to the neutral corner, count's not supposed to start till he goes there. By the time Ali gets out of the way, Walcott tries to pick up the count, looks over, sees the timekeeper, goes over to talk to the timekeeper. Liston gets back up. They start fighting again. And the timekeeper said it's already been 10 seconds. The fight's over. And then Walcott goes in and waves the fight off.
What a crazy...
That is what happened with the Phantom punch. That wasn't just that one shot and then he was counted out and didn't get up. He got up. And nobody talks about that because they forget when legend becomes fact, people talk the legend.
Well, you know what?
Talk about the whole thing.
Legends sometimes a little bit more make, like you're saying, they make for better stories, but not necessarily reflective of reality. That's one of the things we try to get down to here, the nitty gritty of it. You mentioned prison stories, and I mentioned Darnell Boone, who was a murderous puncher, one of the most dangerous gatekeepers of the last 20 years. Adonis Stevenson, a guy who ended up getting derailed by Darnell Boone early in his career, was another murderous puncher, and allegedly he too knocked out a bunch of people in prison. Allegedly, some people tried to jump him, and he ended up knocking all of them out. Allegedly, and I can believe that some of these stories because he's one guy, okay, but that's the other thing about Curtis Sheppard. Apparently, 20 inmates jumped him. He ended up fighting them all to a standstill. So I said, how bad were these prisoners at fighting that they couldn't beat up on one guy? But shout out to everybody in the chat. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying the show here. We were talking about pound-for-pound discussions. We were talking about the fantasy fight between Usyk and Vladimir Klitschko, which got brought up earlier this week by Malinaji and Chris Algieri. We were talking about, I mentioned Charley Burley. We were talking about Curtis the Hatchetman Sheppard, supposedly one of the biggest punchers you've never heard of before. By the way, somebody in the chat brought up, who was, shout out to all of you guys out there, Barry Nivola, Sean Rain, Bones. Bones says, talk about the father of the liver punch, Kid Azteca. You want to talk about legends, Kid Azteca is one of those dudes that, if you're Mexican, you've probably heard of him. He used to fight in the 1940s, I believe. And like he said, the granddaddy of the left hook to the liver. A lot of legend surrounds him. I've looked up his record. I think he had over 200 fights or thereabouts. And they say, I don't know where I remember where I heard this, but supposedly he's got 100 more on top of that weren't listed, which I find difficult to believe. But again, we might do a show on Kid Azteca one of these days. Really get prepared for it. But yeah, Kid Azteca, there's a lot of legends surrounding him. In regards to who exactly he was. Now, the other thing I wanted to bring up here, Chief, is Barry McGuigan. Because you've often heard me, whenever we talk about the International Boxing Hall of Fame and how the standards aren't quite up to the standards of, let's say, the Baseball Hall of Fame, which I've confirmed with Recognize, who's a big baseball fan. He tells me that, yeah, indeed, the Baseball Hall of Fame, I don't know what the official name is, their standards are quite high. You have to have had exceptional accomplishments in your repertoire, in your dossier, to be able to make it in there. Because nowadays, the International Boxing Hall of Fame seems to be, well, if you had exceptional accomplishments that aren't necessarily limited to wins, then yeah, you get to make it. You make it in there. And I understand there's a participant category where promoters make it, or actors such as Sylvester Stallone. Oh shit! Hold on a second. My connection's. Can you still hear me, Chief?
I got you loud and clear.
Sorry, my connection was starting to spurg out a little bit here. Hopefully it doesn't go out. Don't go out. Oh, it's red. No. Hopefully it comes back. Hold on a second. Give me 2 seconds.
Gotcha.
It's starting to go back. Okay, it's back to green. All right, it's back to green. Fantastic. I thought we were going to lose it there for a second. So anyway, long story short, we've talked about the International Boxing Hall of Fame and its relatively low standards. So Barry McGuigan is one of the examples I often bring up. And then I started thinking, you know what? Poor Barry McGuigan doesn't deserve to be. I don't say that to necessarily say he was a bad fighter, but I'm just saying his accomplishments were limited. So in this part of the episode, I want to sort of talk a little bit about Barry McGuigan and highlight the positives, but also why he shouldn't necessarily be in the BDA Boxing Hall of Fame and the Boxing Chief Hall of Fame, which I believe its standards are quite high. Now, hold on a second. The signal's back to red here. Hold on. God damn it! I don't want to start talking and then all of a sudden. Yeah, I don't want to.
I'm biased. We know this.
Sorry, but the connection keeps going to red here. I don't want to continue talking and then all of a sudden it ends up going out and blah blah. Maybe I got too many stuff open here. Let me see. Hold on. Let me close a couple of things here. People aren't saying that the stream is going down, so hold on a second. Yeah, I don't know why the signal is fluctuating here. And that's the other thing. We were supposed to do the episode yesterday, but then I told Chief we were having a rainstorm, ice storm yesterday. And I said, with the internet connection that we've got here, it ain't gonna, I don't think it's gonna hold up. So there's no storm today, and yet the signal is fluctuating here. No good. No good. Are people in the chat, are we what's the word I'm looking? Are we lagging or are we okay? Let me see. I'm gonna ask directly in the chat. Are we lagging? Hopefully not. Hopefully not. All right. Well, listen. I'm gonna
Ice raids.
Yeah, ice raid storm. Yeah. Well, listen. We're gonna continue the show, and if I break out, Chief, or if I break up, rather, you let me know, and maybe I'll just disconnect some things here to restart the modem. But back to Barry McGuigan. So Barry McGuigan, featherweight champion, or titleist, whatever you want to call him. And I often bring him up as an example of of the low standards that the International Boxing Hall of Fame has now. But Barry McGuigan from the Republic of Ireland came up through the ranks. He, like most people from the UK or thereabouts, because he's not officially from the UK, but you know what I mean. He lives amongst the UK people. Ended up winning the British title. And I think he actually had to get a license of some sort with the BBOC. I forget what exactly happened for him to be eligible for the actual British Championship. So he won the British Championship, then he won the European title, featherweight title. So he went down through that route, and he finally ended up working up his way up to the ranks, took on Juan Laporte, a very entertaining fight. For years, I'd heard about that fight, and I'd heard some people would say, as it often happens with Laporte, like, oh, he deserved that win. He got robbed. I watched the fight. No, he didn't get, he didn't get robbed. It was a very competitive fight, as he often was with Laporte. But Barry McGuigan ate a hell of a right hand from Laporte, that's for sure, and took it and kept on coming, and actually had Laporte in a little bit of trouble there in the 12th round. Excuse me, the 10th round. And so Barry McGuigan beat Laporte. So if you could beat Laporte, that means you weren't all that bad. Works his way up gets in there against Eusebio Pedrosa, Panamanian fighter, who was making the 20th defense of his title, I believe. And yeah, it happened in London, England, which wasn't exactly McGuigan's hometown, but it was close enough, right? And, Pedrosa was a tall fighter for his weight, more experienced. And on top of that, he was a dirty fighter. He had all the prerequisites to take a young, inexperienced fighter out of his zone. And that didn't happen. Now, some people can say, well, Barry McGuigan fighting in the UK, that must have been an advantage. Well, remember, sometimes it can be an advantage, sometimes it can be a disadvantage, because you got people, you got to go to the pressers and you got to promote the fight. I don't know if you went to radio stations or talked to a lot of newspaper people to promote the fight. Then you got friends and family probably harping you about, tickets, can I get a ticket, blah, 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 the accommodations, blah, blah, blah. So it can often be a detriment to fighting at or near home. But that didn't happen with McGuigan. He ended up hurting Pedrosa a bunch of times. I think he dropped him and ended up winning a unanimous decision, and he took the featherweight championship home. Then he defended it against Bernard Taylor, whom people say was one of the best amateurs, American amateurs, if not just at the time, but of all time. Didn't make it to the 1980 Olympics because of the boycott there with the USSR by Jimmy Carter. But Bernard Taylor was one of the fastest guys you'll ever see or not see because not a lot of people know about him. But McGuigan chased him down and ended up stopping him in between rounds. They pulled Bernard Taylor out of there. So he had he made a good defense. Then he defended against Danilo Cabrera, stopped him in the 14th round. Then he goes to the U.S., Nevada, and takes on Steve Cruz, who was a late replacement. I think he was supposed to fight some Argentinian fighter. That guy fell through, and then Cruz came along. He got voted 1986 Ring Magazine's Fight of the Year, and it was indeed quite a battle, but then Cruz rallied late, ended up dropping McGuigan late in the fight. McGuigan lost a upset decision against Cruz. Cruz never really became much thereafter either. He was a Texan fighter, and some people say that allegedly he wasn't prepared for the gravity or the responsibility of holding on to the title. McGuigan came back with a couple more wins, but then got stopped on a cut by Jim McDonnell in 1989, and that's all she wrote for McGuigan. So that's his career there. He ended up blaming the harsh Nevada heat, which his Catalonian disposition didn't agree with. And that's McGuigan's career. Very good career. Hell of a left hook to the body. If you guys, you know me, I'm a body punching fan. And I like, if McGuigan was fighting right now, Chief, I'd probably be a fan of his because I'd say, whoa, this guy gets it. He's not a back foot bitch. And like I said, a left hook to the body, about as good a left hook to a body that I've seen from any European and from any fighter, say for that matter. Chavez, Mickey Ward, Olivares, Miguel Cotto, whichever fighter, great body puncher you want to bring up. McGuigan's right up there with him as far as I'm concerned. So what do you think about McGuigan making it to the Hall of Fame? Did he get into the Hall of Fame, as some people assert, because he managed to unite and rally Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland people around him, or what's the deal here?
He was an exciting guy that excited the writers. I mean, that's how you get in. The writers vote you in. So whatever he did to stir whatever it was inside of them, one, he was famous. There's International Boxing Hall of Fame, not the International Boxing Hall of Accomplishments.
Right.
As my mentor has told. So, but I mean, as an accomplishment, he beat Eusebio Pedroza. That's not a slouch. That's not an easy fight to do. And Eusebio Pedroza also, again, remember how we've talked about this before, which is more impressive, winning titles in 4 weight classes or making 20 title defenses in 1 weight class. And only a handful of people have made 20 since the beginning of boxing. Since 1980, we've had like 30 people become 4 division champions. So obviously, winning your 20th title defense, which Pedroza didn't do, because he lost to Barry McGuigan. So what Barry McGuigan stopped was historic, because that would have been a 20th title defense at the featherweight weight class, which I think Abe Vitali has over 2 reigns. Pedroza was going to have it over 1 reign, and it was stopped because of one person, Barry McGuigan. So he stopped a legendary record of having in a particular division of a single title reign of 20 title defenses. So that's significant. Does he deserve to be in the Hall of Fame based off of that short of a resume? I'm going to say no, based off of the same thing I've said about other fighters. And I would do that. But most of the other fighters that had short reigns also didn't beat a Hall of Famer. Eusebio Pedroza is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's in the Hall of Fame right now as we speak, for a good reason. He was a tough man to beat. He was a tricky fighter. And his way of being dirty, it sounds like he almost had a classy way of doing it, to where, like, when he threw that hook, he threw it way to where it looked like it was an accident, When he's throwing the 1, 2, 3, it wasn't a jab right hand left hook. It was a jab head overhand right. He just kind of had a way. If you move too much, you can guarantee you he was going to step on that foot to keep you still long enough to throw a few hip shots to slow you down. Yes, it was put in there. One of the icing on the cake is he has a win over a Hall of Famer. Someone who's in the Hall of Fame, and you've done accomplishments on top of that, then maybe you should be considered in the Hall of Fame. The problem is, in McGuigan's case, he didn't win titles in 3 weight classes like Vasquez did. He didn't make 9 title defenses all on the road like Vasquez did. He wasn't a world traveler like Vasquez or Pedroza. Pedroza made many of those defenses in other people's hometowns. So, long story longer, he was very entertaining, tough, and there was a lot of drama going on with Ireland back in the day, and maybe that stirred up some fire for people to want to vote for him out of sympathy. But out of his accomplishments, did he really do anything outside of beating Pedroza that really says, yep, he deserves to be in there with everybody else? With all due respect to him, as fun as he was to watch, no, I don't see anything on his resume.
All right, now, Chief, with all that being said, that was great, but I'm going to have to disconnect here for people out there, too. We're going to have to disconnect because the connection is going worse by the second here. So let me disconnect here. We'll be back in about a minute or two, all right? So are we back? I think we're back here. Hold on a second. Oh boy, what happened here? Hold on a second. Give me 2 seconds here. Something. Okay, no, yeah, we're back. Okay, we're back. Okay, I think we're back here. So, Chief, you were on a roll talking about old Barry McGuigan and about whether he should be in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. So I got to go to the latrine again, or the commode, as I like to say. But just break down, because again, people might not be familiar with what we're talking about here as it pertains to the International Boxing Hall of Fame. So could you explain the problem with the International Boxing Hall of Fame and why we're bringing it up in regards to the standards that they have? And also, by the way, refresh my memory, but haven't I heard that the California Boxing Hall of Fame actually has higher standards than the International Boxing Hall of Fame? And I'll be right back. Please take over.
I have no idea what the California's standards are, and I don't know who's on the board. I did meet when I went to induction ceremony in 2007 in the International Boxing Hall of Fame in Canastota, New York. I did meet some people that were on there, and I know that the writers are the ones that majority make up the board, and they vote people in. As my mentor, Enrique, told me, he said, it's Enrique. How do you pronounce his last name? I don't have it here. Anyway, point being, he told me that it's the International Boxing Hall of Fame, not International Boxing Hall of Accomplishments. And so some of it has to do with, for the Canastota one, like what kind of an impact did you have in the sport during your era at that time? Well, so one that we like to debate on this panel is Arturo Gatti. Does he deserve to be in there? Was Gatti skilled? To an extent, not at the upper echelon level, but he had a good jab, he had a good hook, he threw good combinations, he could do things, but who could he do them against? Well, Mickey Ward, what's his name? Gabriel Willis, guys like that. Tracy Harris Patterson, who was a bantamweight and eventually won a junior lightweight title. So I'm not naming anybody that's like the best in their division, and I get that. But he did do something else. He brought a lot of excitement. The only two people that have been voted for Fight of the Year more times than Arturo Gatti are Muhammad Ali and Carmen Basilio. And Carmen Basilio is the reason why we have the International Boxing Hall of Fame, because it's in his hometown of Canastota, New York. So when you bring that level of action and you bring that level of notoriety to the sport, let's face it, Roy Jones was never a candidate for Fight of the Year. Way more skilled than Gatti. Mm-hmm. So there's different reasons why people get voted in. And how many people, when you mention one of Gatti's later fights in his career, does anyone say, no, I missed that one? I never heard anybody say that. They saw it live. Why? Because it was exciting. Maybe they wanted to see him get his butt beat because they thought he was a disgrace to boxing because he didn't have the skill of Pernell Whitaker. Maybe they hated him that much. Mm-hmm. Great. Still watched him. I never met anyone who said, yeah, I missed that Gatti fight. I didn't see that one. No, if it was on the Joe Hutchins fight, some people might have missed. Right. But all of his fights on HBO, even the gimme ones that were to help rebuild his career after the Ivan Robinson losses, people saw him. They were on undercards of the Lennox Lewis fights. They saw these fights because he was exciting and because he brought something to the sport. You know, so when you look at people, why are they in? And the tit for tat goes both ways on top of that. So I forget his name. One of Customado's fighters, the Puerto Rican gentleman that fought I can't remember his. Yeah, was he in?
That's a good point.
Because Customado.
Yeah, people have brought up.
He was well.
Well,
yeah,
actually,
go ahead.
You actually bring up what a coincidence you bring that up. First of all, as it pertains to Barry McGuigan, just real quick, there was also a debate about, well, how come he never rematched Steve Cruz? They were talking about that over at Boxing 24. Some people were talking about, again, that the Pedrosa that he fought was past his best, but then like Chief already addressed that. But you brought up we're talking about the International Boxing Hall of Fame now. This is from the September 1997 edition, the one I mentioned earlier with Deloya, Jones Jr., and Whitaker on the cover. And somebody wrote in, this is time for the readers' comments here from Ring Magazine, 1997. This is from Frank Rizzo, Brooklyn, New York. That's either he stole the name from the Jerky Boys or the Jerky Boys people stole the name from him, because I can't believe anybody would actually be named Frank Rizzo. But anyway, he said, Hall of Fame bias. I'm a bit bewildered that the so-called International Boxing Hall of Fame can elect Jose Torres and ignore such true legends as Miguel Canto, Antonio Cervantes, and Eusebio Pedrosa. No disrespect to Torres, but he made 3 defenses against no-names. Meanwhile, Canto successfully defended the flyweight belt 14 times, Kid Pambele retained the junior welterweight title 16 times, over 2 reigns, and Pedrosa made 19 successful defenses of the featherweight title. It seems obvious, he says, the moderate achievements of North American champions are recognized and rewarded ahead of the incredible accomplishments of international legends. I suggest the International Boxing Hall of Fame change its name to the Continental America's Boxing Hall of Fame. Chief, all those dudes that they mentioned, I think, are in the Hall of Fame now, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, every last one of them that he mentioned. He said what? Pedrosa,
Miguel
Cervantes,
Canto.
and who?
Miguel Canto.
Yeah, they're all 3 of them are in. All 3 of them are in.
Well, there you go. So, but then again, that could be because, like we've talked about before, the International Boxing Hall of Fame now, it's a tourist attraction and thus requires attendance. And if you're inducting a guy from the 1920s and you got their great-great-grandchildren accepting the title for them, doesn't really quite attract that many people. But if you got current boxers who actually show up and show their faces and can actually talk without the need of some sort of machine on their throats, then you get yourself an attraction. And then on top of that, it used to be you had to wait 5 years to be considered for induction, 5 years after retirement. Now it's what, 3 years?
It's 3.
3. So you see how they're sort of manipulating things. So it's no longer the International Boxing Hall of Fame of accomplishments and wins, but rather just, as Chief said, accomplishments. Did you make your mark on boxing? Yeah, okay, you might get in. And this brings us to the question. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I called them not too long ago because I had heard a rumor that Vernon Forrest was going to get in, and I was going to call them to see if they knew who was going to be accepting the induction on his behalf. Well, he's not getting in yet, so we'll just leave that alone as that goes. But for the record, I was going to mention my good friend Kevin Wright be the one, if they want a family member to accept on his behalf, to accept it for him, because they knew each other growing up, and Kevin was part of that gym crowd between 92 to 96 that had a lot of really good ranked fighters there, and Kevin was part of the staple of the Augusta Boxing Club first starting. So I was going to nominate him to accept the award if they didn't have a family member. The point of why I called was that, but in the conversation to the lady that answered the phone, who shall remain nameless, 1, because I don't remember her name, and 2, because what I'm about to say, I don't want her to get in trouble for. I talked about the fact that there's going to be a situation coming up where you're going to have your Keith Thurmans and your Errol Spences and your those guys coming up, and obviously they're going to be on the ballot and have to be talked about and voted in. And when I mentioned those names and just like the level of people that they are and the accomplishments versus the people of yesteryear, she just kind of goes, yeah, we've been talking about that.
Oh.
So,
I mean, I can't blame them. You know, if they changed it to and said, and if they had a special category, like, you know, for example, people who have made an impact or a significant contribution to the sport of boxing, regardless of wins or whatever, put in Arturo Gatti and you put your Mickey Wards in there, or like the Barry McGuigans. But there should be a separate section for guys who actually accomplish something via wins, whether multiple title defenses, or we're talking in the double digits, or weight hopping and, you know, winning multiple titles in multiple ways. You know, but make a distinction. But anyway, at the end of
to be fair, in a situation where there's going to come up and there's going to be a debate and there's going to be people that are going to be coming up for nomination. And one of them is going to be Keith Thurman. And you're going to have to look at the fact that, okay, he and Errol Spence never fought. And Bud came up after he was not really a relative welterweight anymore. But from on the way up to the time of the peak, he was the best welterweight in the world. End of story.
That's true.
So he may not have been quite as exciting or as powerful as his record showed, because to be honest with the world-class level, I did not see this power blowing people out. But he beat undefeated people to become the WBA interim or regular or whatever. And he was in those circumstances outside of his control. And then when all of it was said and done and laid out, because Manny and Floyd were gone, and we're trying to see who's taking over the division. Spence wasn't there yet. He wasn't ranked yet. Floyd talked about him. Big deal. He wasn't really, and even if he was a mandatory, by the time Thurman got what he needed to get done, he'd beaten all of the top junior welterweights, ranked fighters, unified half to 2/3, depending on where you consider the WBO. And then he was the best welterweight in the world. So in a division of a world of boxing where things are wide open and there's belts everywhere else like that, the welterweight division was nailed down by one guy for a brief moment in time, and his name was Keith Thurman. Is that enough for him to get in the Hall of Fame? I don't know. But what you can say is the fact that of all the people that are around during that time of those welterweights, you're post Bernard Hopkins, you're post Mayweather, you're post Manny Pacquiao, and you're into this era, and you're starting to say, so who was the best featherweight in the world at that time? Who was the best lightweight in the world at that time? Who's the best? We know who the best welterweight was.
Right.
And so he established his mark, as brief as it was, and he deserves to be in a conversation. Now, notice I didn't say that he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame of that. I said he deserves to be in the conversation. From there on out, the writers get to make their vote. But there's going to be a point in time when he's going to be on the ballot, or to be talked about on the ballot, and there's going to be a reason why. Just like Donald Curry, at one point in time, he got in after we kind of said he was a quote-unquote never was. It wasn't he was never was. He just didn't live up to all his potential. But there was a point in time when he was the best welterweight in the world.
Absolutely, but that's the thing, though. That's the they've opened Pandora's box with some of these inductions. Like Ignamar Johansson, Floyd Patterson's in there.
Yeah.
Excuse me, no, Ignamar Johansson, I think, is in there.
They're both in there.
They're both. See, that's they open up Pandora's box by doing that. So, by those standards, yeah, Keith Thurman is definitely going to be in the conversation. You know, it seems like the International Boxing Hall of Fame, their motto or their standard right now is leave no boxer behind. Remember, like in the 90s, it was leave no child behind. It's the same thing with these boxers. You know, none of these guys are getting left behind. Put them all in there. And speaking of Hall of Fames, I tell you what's not going. I tell you what's not going into the Internet Hall of Fame. The International Boxing Hall of Fame's website. Look at this. Look at these layouts. Like they're stuck in the year 2000. Maybe they are hard up for money, and I don't blame them for introducing all these boxers. But interestingly enough, Chief, I went to the class of 2026, which I think they announced it a couple of months ago, maybe, because I think I vaguely remember this. Check this, the list of inductees are in there. Jackie Neva and Naoko Fujika, that's women's boxers, by the way, which definitely shouldn't be in there. I don't think there should even be a female category. I'm old school, just, you know, it is what it is. I don't think women should be in the box, in the Hall of Fame of anything. No, I'm kidding. But Antonio Tarver in there, okay. Golovkin is like, well, you know, like you said, with the Thurman thing, well, he was the best welterweight. At some point, Golovkin was considered the best middleweight for a while there, for years. Nigel Benn, though, I go. So that's the list of inductees there for this year, Chief. Something tells me that if it wasn't for Golovkin or Tarver, for that matter, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know how many people.
I'm going to have to step outside for a minute because obviously it's getting noise at my end of the house and it's freezing outside. But to keep this somewhat professional, not hearing my son yell at the dog, I'm stepping outside to take. So Nigel Benn, there are people that think he's long overdue. I'm on the fence on if he's long overdue, but I'm going to say the fact that I'm not objecting for him to be in there. Golovkin, I consider him having 20 title defenses. So I'm going to say, well, some of this is a regular belt. If you can't count for Tank, you can't count it for him. The difference there is that Tank knew he was going after a regular belt because there was a sitting undisputed champion, and Felix Sturm didn't want to fight Golovkin, so he had himself elevated to a super champion without doing a unification fight, which was the WBA's standard on becoming a super champion at that time. So Golovkin fought what he could get his hands on, and he defended it well 20 times. You don't want to count those regular titles defenses for your own personal reasons because it was a regular belt and not because of the circumstances of why it was a regular belt. Go ahead. I don't care. Mm-hmm. But he's still part of the 20 defense club.
That's true.
Mind you, the fact that Bernard Hopkins is the only fighter in the Hall of Fame that no contest is credited as a title defense. Which would, if it's counted the way it's counted for everybody else, he only has 19. So the only person with 20 title defenses at middleweight would be Golovkin, unless you don't count his regular title defenses, in which case nobody's got 20 title defenses at middleweight. But they both did beat Monzon's record of 14.
That's right. Yeah.
Either way you look at it, both of them have beaten Monzon's record. Whether which one of them holds the record or not is an opinion. Point being, the fact though, 20 title defenses, again, if you count all of them, which I do, he's part of like maybe 10 boxers in the history of boxing that has 20 title defenses in one weight class. 10 since the beginning of boxing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he deserves to be in there. You can say it's weak competition. Okay, well, Joe Louis supposedly fought the Bum of the Month Club. You try and tell me that Richard Dunn was a great heavyweight when was part of Muhammad Ali's 9 or 10 defenses in his second reign? I mean, a lot of people said that the only great fighters that Hagler fought were Duran and Hearns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that means he fought 12. That means he fought 10 nobodies.
Well,
which we know isn't true.
sure.
So to put these in perspective, numbers do sometimes quantity and quality are the same. Sometimes you have to have the quantity to get the quality. Sometimes the quality is over the quantity. It's circumstantial based off of the fighter. And then the last one, who else was
Tarver.
being inducted? Tarver. He beat Roy Jones twice. It was a faded Roy Jones. I get it. He actually held the title several times. Because after he lost to Bernard Hopkins, I think he won it again.
I don't think he did. He had a couple of good wins thereafter. He didn't complete. I mean, he got decisively beaten by Chad Dawson afterwards, but he did upset Danny Green, who'd knocked out Roy Jones. I want to say circa 2010, and he also comprehensively outboxed Clinton Woods, who was a good contender, who was he was on a good run back then. So he did have some, but I don't remember him winning the title again. But your point stands: beating Roy Jones twice, beating Glenn Johnson, even though he also dropped the decision to him. And then on top of that, if you want to add the Montel Griffin win, the Eric Harding win, even though he also lost to Harding early in his career. But he had some good solid wins on the come up. Oh, and Reggie Johnson too, he beat, I believe. So yeah, I guess.
But Clinton Woods was the sitting IBF champ when he beat him. So he won the belt back after he lost to Bernard to Clinton from Clinton Woods.
There you go.
And he lost to Chad Dawson. After Chad Dawson, he didn't win another major title fight. He fought with vacant IBOs at cruiserweight. But one of them was Danny Green, who was a competent fighter. They were the lower tier. They were the other guys at cruiserweight. They were the lightweights that moved up, but they were competent fighters in that division. But so you go along. I don't know how deep his resume was, but he beat Reggie Johnson for the IBF, avenged Eric Harding, beats Montel Griffin, so now unifies, loses to Roy Jones, beats Roy Jones, loses to Glenn Johnson, beats Glenn Johnson, beats Roy Jones again, loses to Hopkins, wins the title back against Clinton Woods. So I'm not saying that's Hall of Fame worthy, but he held the title 3 different times. A lot of people win it once and never win it back.
Yeah, and you've heard us talking a lot about Roy Jones in the last couple of episodes. The fact that Tarver ended the run, and actually some could argue ruined Roy Jones. It's a bit of an accomplishment right there. Now, in terms of Golovkin, you made a good case for him too. And as far as I'm concerned, he beat Canelo the first time, and no one's been able to beat Canelo on the front foot. Bivol and Crawford ended up doing on the back foot. Golovkin actually did it coming forward. I've never seen anybody do that to Canelo for 12 rounds. So, but then again, there's a question.
I thought he beat him off the back foot in the rematch. So
there you go. But then again, he didn't officially get the win. So
right, you're right.
He didn't officially get the win. So should that be taken into consideration? As for Nigel Benn, if I remember correctly here, because I was looking for it, the KO Boxing Presents Boxing 2006 had the top 20 British boxers of all time list. And Nigel Benn came in at number 16. So if you can make it into the list, then yeah, you had a very good career. By the way, if you look at this list here of top 20 British boxers of all time, after Lennox Lewis, because they had him number 1, the rest of the list, the next 6-7 entries are a bunch of guys from the turn of the 20th century. So again, we could do an episode on that about how good were these guys anyway? Because I mean, we're talking about legends and we're going off by what other people wrote, and the very little scarce footage that we have. These guys look robotic and they look like clay figures from afar, so it's kind of difficult to ascertain how good they were. But, Chief, in regards to this, so we're talking about the International Boxing Hall of Fame, right? And
Mhm.
I looked at the list earlier this week, just as just to peruse it and see who's in there now, because I haven't been paying attention to it in a while. I found the name Vitali Klitschko in there. And I said, very interesting. Very, very interesting indeed. So I'm going to put up the list, his record here on the screen in case you need to look it up, or maybe you have it, or you can look it up yourself on your computer, however you want to do it. But I want to ask you, this is the surprise question, because I want to get your immediate reaction to this, or your immediate breakdown. Should Vitali Klitschko, and let's say we got the high standards here, forget the International Boxing Hall of Fame standards. Let's talk about a mythical Hall of Fame where we got high standards. Should Vitali Klitschko be a Hall of Fame fighter?
Yeah. How many people have been a 3-time heavyweight champion?
Now, was he really a 3-time heavyweight champion, a real heavyweight champion?
Okay, so if you're going to discount the WBO, which, by the way, Mike Tyson was ranked number 1 for and turned that fight down. So let's put that in perspective. Yeah, the time that I think it was one of his fights over in Europe when Tyson became the number 1 contender for the WBO, and he was going through his suspensions here and there, and he was everything else. He was the number 1 contender for that belt while Vitali had the belt. So you can't tell me that wasn't a shot that was completely available, because Mike Tyson mentioning his name, Klitschko's going to turn that I don't think so. He turned down Mike Tyson money? No way in hell. Pardon my French. Not going to happen. Sure. So the one that didn't pursue that situation was Mike Tyson. Just putting that up. Am I saying he ducked him? No. But he clearly didn't want to go that route for the title shot. To put that in perspective. So if you don't count the WBO, he's still a 2-time heavyweight champion, and took 3 years off to come back and take on the biggest puncher of the division and beat him soundly.
Talking about Samuel Peter.
Yeah. Now, I'm not saying Samuel Peter's a great fighter, but he was the biggest puncher in the heavyweight division at that time.
And after 3 years, that's quite significant too there.
Did you do Sam Peter? Okay, December of 2004 was his last fight. In October of 2008, he fights Sam Peter. So almost 4 years. So now it was no longer an undefeated monster Sam Peter, because his brother had already defeated him and outboxed him, even though Vladimir got put down a few times. And Peter probably had a few tough moments with James Toney by this time. So he wasn't like the feared monster that can't be beaten by this time, noted. But he was still the hardest puncher in the division, and he was a tough guy to beat and not easy to hurt. And not only does he come back from a 4-year layoff to beat Sam Peter, he knocks him out. Juan Carlos Gomez was a great cruiser.
He stopped him,
Chris Areola was the flavor of the month, beat him up. Kevin Johnson went the distance. All right, beats the day, hospitalizes Shannon Briggs. Nobody else did that.
Unfortunately. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we're not off too far on the same mark there. But and then on top of that, I mean, coming back to beat Corey Sanders in an action fight. And let's face it, the reason why he possibly wasn't heavyweight champion sooner was, my personal opinion, they wanted to save Lennox Lewis versus him for a pay-per-view bout instead of letting the fight play out. Because for all those people say, oh, one more punch could have ruined his eye. Lennox wasn't coming on and hitting that. He was lacing that eye every time they got in a clinch, but he wasn't hitting him with right hands. And Klitschko not actively defending himself in that eye. So it wasn't like he might have been quote unquote dominating the fight, but he was clearly winning the fight. He was clearly defending himself, and Lennox was clearly fading. So the only big thing that some people are going to say, no, he shouldn't get the Hall of Fame because he quit against Chris Bird. According to sources, and there are sources that are on his side, so there may be a little bit of a bias, the camera angle that they looked at his shoulder when it was when they went to do the surgery said it looked like a grenade went off inside there.
Yeesh.
So, and as someone noted, I think the documentaries used to be on Amazon, and it's just called Klitschko. But someone was making the comments like, when you got a bad cut, you can see it. when someone's, knocked in a broken jaw and they go down and they can't get up but when it's a shoulder injury, you can't see it. So you're like, really? You couldn't have just survived one more round, but you don't know the damage of what's going on inside that man's body at the time. To know if it's like a major, like, can you really move your arm anymore? And I'm not trying to say I quote unquote can sympathize with him because I've never been anywhere close to a professional athlete, but I have had shoulder injuries. And what I learned about the shoulder is the hip has a socket and it fits in, and it's almost like those old plastic toys where there's a ball socket and you can snap it in place and it kind of holds itself in there because it's got it going from toy back to reality. It's got tendons, ligaments, and sockets that the ball joint is inside of. The shoulder's just hanging there, nothing by tendons and ligaments. Mm-hmm. It's not inside of any socket. It's just there. And so when things go bad, there's no structural form to brace it. It's nothing but more tendons and ligaments. So if something tears, all these other things have to compensate for it. And if they can't compensate for it, more damage gets done. So I don't know how bad he was injured. The pain level is bad enough for him to say, I don't want to win. That night anyway. And he was labeled a coward for that, and then proved himself against Lennox Lewis that he wasn't a coward because that cut was gruesome, but he was still fighting through it. Does he deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? I count the WBO as much as the next person because we still call Camacho a 3-division champion, and we were calling him a 3-division champion back when he fought Chavez. We were calling Hearns a 5 to 6 time world champion, or 5 or 6 weight division champion because he had the WBO at 168 in a quote-unquote unification fight with Sugar Ray Leonard. If it applies to them, it applies to him. If it applies to him, then he's a 3-time heavyweight champion.
Well, that is indeed an interesting standard. If you're talking about the WBO, if I may offer a different perspective here, just for the sake of argument, as it pertains to old Vitali Klitschko. For the people out there who are just joining us, anybody who's just joining us, we're talking about whether Vitali Klitschko should be in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. And we're talking about an actual Hall of Fame, not by the standards that they've got now in the IBHOF, which are pretty low. We're talking about an actual, the BDA Hall of Fame. And, you mentioned Klitschko's accomplishments, the fact that if you want to consider the WBO, which a lot of people do nowadays, and that he should be in there. But I'll say this. Against Chris Bird, he dislocates his shoulder. Hey, learn how to throw a punch. You've been doing it for a while now. What the hell are you doing? Second of all, Lennox Lewis, I think he was beating Lennox Lewis, and a lot of us believe that if had the fight continued, Lewis probably would have gone down at some point. But again, that was a fat Lennox Lewis. Again, that's not Vitali Klitschko's fault, but I'm thinking, well, how good really was he? Same thing with Kirk Johnson. Now, again, it's not Vitali's fault that Kirk Johnson showed up looking like a whale. But still, I mean, how good that win is that? Corey Sanders, okay, he avenged his brother. Danny Williams was coming off the Mike Tyson win. That's one of the reasons why he got the fight, because he managed to beat Tyson. But again, Tyson at that time was a part-time fighter and almost full-time cokehead. Now, the Samuel Peter fight, I'd forgotten that he'd stopped Peter. I think he made him quit, right?
But it says retired. So, yeah, he made it. Hold on. Yeah, he made both him and Chris Arreola quit.
Well, there you go. Yeah, now Chris Arreola.
Someone stopped the fight with Chris Arreola. I don't think he wanted to quit, but I'm pretty sure Sam Peter did.
Well, I remember Chris Arreola crying afterwards on camera, which is a big no-no for me. He's not getting into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. I can tell you that much right now. Juan Carlos Gomez, because of the crying. Juan Carlos Gomez was a cruiserweight. Kevin Johnson is a perennial journeyman. Yeah. Albert Sosnowski, I think he was like a football player at some point, and he should not have been in there. Same thing with Thomas Adamek, another cruiserweight. Derek Chisora, okay, that's a good win. Shannon Briggs, that was Shannon Briggs did a whole lot of talking and couldn't even come. What did he blame that loss on, by the way? Was it he got the wrong asthma medication that time again, or what was it? Do you recall?
Well, he was in the hospital, so I didn't get to hear an interview. So
no, but I mean, he must have said something about the fight years after.
But I didn't pay attention.
Right.
So you're pointing out quality of competition, and I sense where you're going with this. I do remember an article, and if I can ever find it, I'll post it in the Discord, about the fact that he was complaining about the fact he was the heavyweight champion that couldn't get a fight. He tried to get a fight with a unification fight with Valuev, and Valuev turned it down. David Hay after his brother first instead of coming after him. He was looking for opportunities to defend his title. That's another reason why he eventually retired. It was just nobody's fighting me. I've got to fight Shannon Briggs. Kevin Johnson was undefeated and ranked at the time, so he became a journeyman of not much, but he was 22-0 at the time and was number 1 ranked, or he was pretty high ranked if it wasn't number 1. Your Sonowski, I don't know much about, and so some of these guys, you're just like, why do they get these? Adamek, I think, because he was a cruiserweight champion, got ranked at heavyweight, and it wasn't a mandatory, but he got ranked up high enough to where that was a fight that would sell in Germany, which is where the Klitschkos fought. So, yeah, he was a cruiserweight, but like Juan Carlos Gomez was a big cruiserweight, 6'4".
Oh, okay, there you go. I'd forgotten that.
So it wasn't like it was like a 6 foot even, 190-pound man moving up, which was what the division was at that point in time. It was 190 something pounds. And it's something I brought up in the debate when people talk about Holyfield and Usyk is that they try to say that Holyfield's a naturally bigger guy. Usyk fought as a heavyweight in the amateurs, which was 200 something pounds, turned pro at 200 pounds, and the cruiserweight limit while he was champion was 200 pounds. Holyfield was 175 in the amateurs, and then it was 180 to 190 pounds when he was the cruiserweight champion. So, naturally bigger men. So, again, back to Adamek and Gomez, it was 190 pounds when they were there, I do believe. I don't think it was, or it might have been right at like 195-ish, but it wasn't 200 plus pounds. But Juan Carlos Gomez, again, though, was 6'4". So it wasn't when he put it on that weight on like Al Cole, he put it on easily. He filled it out well. He just wasn't a good heavyweight. But unlike Al Cole, Juan Carlos Gomez was a dominant cruiserweight.
Yeah, I remember at one point. At one point, it was him and Jirov. Yeah.
Yeah, but whereas Jirov was just publicly known over here, Gomez was one big over in Germany. Another reason why he got that fight was because they were under Universal promotion. Both of them were. So, I mean, it was easy to promote the fight in Germany because everyone knew who Gomez was because he fought in Germany, even though it was. But again, he had close to 10 title defenses there.
Who was it that he fought in the U.S. and we actually got to see him once? I don't know. I don't know if he fought in the U.S., but the fight was televised, and we saw how fast he was.
It was on HBO, and it was the same night that Joe Messi destroyed Touch of Sleep Williams. Let me see if I can find.
I remember it was a Turkish guy, Sinan Samil Sam. I just looked it up. That was on September 2003.
He had already beaten Al Cole.
I think that might have been it. Well, by the way, listen, again, Vitali Klitschko, I don't know if he's done enough to get in there, but I'll say this. He took a break he retired in 2004, late 2004, and then, like you said, he surfaced back in 2008. But I'm looking at the September 2004 rankings here. This is from Boxing 2005, but again, it's a sister publication of Ring Magazine, so the ratings were about the same. Number 10, Lamont Brewster. Number 9, Danny Williams. Number 8, Jamil McCline. Number 7, Frezo Kendall. 8, Andrew Golota. 5, Monty Barrett. 4, Hazim Rahman. 3, James Toney. 2, John Ruiz. And number 1, Chris Bird, with Vitali still the champ then, right before his retirement. So if he would have stayed for those 3 years, something tells me he would have beaten up, well, maybe not beaten up, but he would have beaten those guys. So he probably could have.
I would say beaten up.
Really?
I mean, that's how he beat people, is he beat them up.
Sure.
He didn't have those fast twitch muscles like his brother, so his knockouts weren't explosive. They were pulverizing. And back to that documentary, they interview them both at the beginning, and it's just them in the locker room warming up, but someone's each fighter or each brother is kind of narrating something. And you know how fighters put their hands together and kind of like twist their wrists around to warm their wrists up and loosen them up. Mm-hmm. Vitali's walking around doing that while Vladimir's the one about to get in the fight. And you hear Vladimir's voice. He goes, Vitali's just a natural born fighter. He says any combat sport he would do well in. He's just a fighter. And seeing how good of a kickboxer I saw the video of him doing, I believe he is a competent combat artist. Now, does that mean he'd be great in every sport? Would he have been an all-time great UFC fighter? I don't necessarily know that. But I think he would have been competent. I think he would have been a contender. I think he might have gotten a couple title shots. He knew how to take care of himself. He was never knocked down. He was never behind in a fight. He was never losing a fight. The fights that he did lose were due to injury, not due to anything else. And he had the highest knockout percentage of any heavyweight champion of his era, and possibly still has it, with the exception of Wilder.
Well, that's a pretty good argument. It's a pretty good argument right there. But I'll say this, man. I think it's not a clear-cut thing, I must say. I think we could spend much more time. Can you hear me, by the way? Hopefully I'm not cutting
Yeah,
Okay.
No, I hear everything just fine.
Well, I think we could spend more time on this, but I think we'll save it for the next time because we do have limited time here. I know Chief at any moment now could be summoned to leave. You never know. So we got to...
Close to dinner time, yes.
Okay. So we were coming close to the end here, so we don't want to spend too much time on any one subject. But so yeah, that was one of the debates that I'm gonna look up because I found a thread on Boxing 24. Again, people discussing whether Vitali should be in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. The other thing I wanted to bring up is from the October 1997 Ring Magazine edition. It's the one with Prince Nassim Hamed on the cover. At the end of the magazine, they had a little bit of a mini preview for upcoming fights. I didn't even know this. Andrew Golota was supposed to fight Ray Mercer at some point, August 16 in Atlantic City, and it was supposed to be some sort of a loser leaves town type of fight where, both guys desperately needed a win. It said here, if Andrew Golota is planning to knock out Ray Mercer when the heavyweights clash on August 16 in Atlantic City, he's every bit as dumb as he appeared to be during his ill-fated battles with Riddick Bowe. As Mercer has proved against big bangers like Tommy Morrison, Lennox Lewis, and Tim Witherspoon, his chin is of Mount Rushmore quality. But when facing Golota, it's not necessarily your chin that should be your first concern. Ray Mercer said, I don't even have balls when I get in the ring. They're up by my chest. I've never been hurt by low blows, even in the gym. I'm nobody's meal. It's a very old-timey expression right there. Mercer doesn't expect Golota to punch downstairs early in the fight. But once he gets hurt, I do believe he'll resort to low blows and cheating, he said. I have no idea why he does it, but it won't bother me, and I won't use it as an excuse. If he bites me, then there's going to be a real fight. Nobody bites Ray Mercer. I like how he put in that little disclaimer there, like, nobody bites Ray Mercer, as if somebody's actually ever tried it before and that he's going to make the distinction that you shouldn't be biting him. And by the way, he also says low blows don't bother him, but biting, that's where he draws the line. So given Golota's history, the article continues, it's tough to overlook the potential for biting, butting, kneeing, low punching, and who knows what else. Regardless, Mercer Golota should be a doozy. Both are strong heavyweights and both are desperate for a win. Then they quote Lou DiBella saying some type of stuff there. But Chief, did you know that they were supposed to be fighting in 97? Do you recall any of that?
Do I recall which part that fight about to happen? I do. I don't remember what made it fall through. I also remember a card, though, that was, I think it was Bob Arum was supposed to put it together. It was going to be in China. It was going to be Ray Mercer versus Frank Bruno and Tommy Morrison versus Herbie for the WBO. And I guess if both guys that they thought were going to win, then a rematch between Mercer and Morrison was going to happen. But that fight fell through because the checks didn't clear. So weird things happen when big fights are on the rise. Sometimes they don't happen. And I don't have the historical record of why every almost fight fell through. But yeah, I do remember that one was on the docket because that's what some of the other guys were doing. Even though this was a little bit later, that's what happened with Morrison and Ruddock. That's how they found each other. They needed a win. Well, two guys not doing anything. Let's throw some money at them. They both took it. Holyfield needed a win after the Michael Moore loss. Ray Mercer was sitting around. What happened? That fight happened. There was a pretty good era when the belts dispersed a little bit due to them stripping Foreman of those belts before Lennox Lewis reunited him through Evander Holyfield, that these fighters were fighting each other. Lewis and Mercer fought. Mercer fought Holyfield. Who else fought? Tim Witherspoon fought Al Cole. He also fought that Jorge Luis Gonzalez, knocked him out. Bo fought Herbie Hyde, and he fought Larry Donald. I mean, that heavyweight division was really active for a while, even though there wasn't one person sitting alone on top. And then there was the fights like you just mentioned and I just mentioned that were proposed of Mercer Bruno, Morrison Hyde, and then Mercer Golota almost happened. So some of these almost did come through. Some of these almost are like the ones you just mentioned that didn't quite, for one reason or another, fell apart.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting.
But it wasn't then.
That's interesting right there, yeah, because, back in the 90s, especially if you reread some of these old Ring Magazine articles, people, they really deride the heavyweight divisions like, oh, it sucks compared to the 60s and 70s. Now people wax poetic about the 90s. So it's almost like you don't know how good you had it until you actually miss it, or you actually don't have it anymore.
The problem wasn't there wasn't a dominant guy sitting on top in the 90s. That was what, after you had Holmes for all those years, and then Tyson was on top, and then Holyfield took over through Buster Douglas and was the one man on top until he lost to Bo. And when it dispersed and they wanted one person to be on top of the division to say, I am the heavyweight champion, like Marciano, like Ali, like Holmes, like all these guys where there was one person on top, we didn't have that. What we had instead that people are romanticizing about now is top quality heavyweight fights, which I won't say a majority of these guys were Hall of Famers, but that they were Hall of Famers like Lewis, Bo, and Holyfield, because all three of them are in the Hall of Fame, were fighting all of the other guys that were like top contenders / championship level guys, with Morrison and Mercer being the WBO variety. And they were all fighting each other, trying to get to that pinnacle spot. And that made the division extremely exciting. We look back at because today's guys aren't doing that. They're waiting for that one shot to get this, that, or the other, instead of all of them fighting each other to try and, establish themselves as I'm the one that needs to be the best. And so the reason why it's romanticized, they were fighting each other. But at the time, what we wanted was one person to be undisputedly on top, and we didn't have that.
Well, funny you should mention that, because this wasn't on the docket, but Mike Tyson recently was on, was it Skip Bayless? I forget. He was recently talking with somebody online, and he was deriding the fact that nowadays these youngins, they only fight twice a year. He says, how can you build a legend if you're only fighting twice a year? I mean, you take a look at Terence Crawford, the last great American fighter. He was fighting a whole bunch of times early on in his career. And then later on, in the last 5 years, he only fought once. But guys like Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, they're only fighting twice a year. So and they're already close to 30. So,
yep.
But then again, certain fighters do get more opportunities despite only fighting twice a year. So I guess those guys tend to benefit from that. But then what about other fighters? So I think, next time we'll bring that up there, that Mike Tyson quote there. Also in the chat, somebody said, Sean Rain says, Don King the Rat. I found a Boxing 24 discussion about Don King, and some people are actually defending Don King, saying that these whole claims of him being the worst promoter of all time in terms of robbing fighters and all that they are overblown. And I got to tell you, I got a couple of things to say about that. So we can save that for the next show. How are we pressed for time here, Chief? How are we doing?
Well, I'm a few minutes, if anything, but I do want to wrap up something about what Mike Tyson was saying.
Mm-hmm.
In 1985, when he turned pro, he fought 15 times. In 86, he fought 13 times. So for him to say this thing about these guys only fighting twice a year, they're almost 30 and everything else like that, you could say maybe they rushed him and they could have brought him along a little slower. So that maybe he could have had more seasoning and real life experience. But when it came time for getting his name out there, he went from a amateurish prospect, of a young amateurish prospect, because remember, he was 18 when he went for the Olympics, to world champion in 2 years and became the most famous person in the world in 2 years.
It's insane.
So his idea of what it takes to be famous is get yourself out there so everyone, because that's what they did for him.
Mm-hmm.
We only really know what our experiences do for each other. You can watch somebody else's and think that might work, but you really know what works because of what's worked for you. Because each person's individually different. The way he was brought along, Miguel Cotto still fought maybe 5 or 6 times in his first year, and then maybe 5 or 6 more in the second. So they brought him along maybe a tad bit slower, but he was still fighting more than just twice a year. That Mayweather protege kid that I can't remember his name because he never fights, has been a pro since he was 15. He doesn't even have 10 fights yet.
That's true.
Well, he's what, 19 now? So he's 19 and he still only has, 9 fights? Snails move faster than that. They're not handling his career right. And so Tyson's point of view, if I may be so bold to attempts to try and read his mind. When you're fighting 13 followed by 15, you have already got like almost 30 fights in your first 2 years, and you're only 21. No, 20. He won the title at 20. So you're only 20, and you've got almost 30 fights. These guys are almost 30, and they barely have 25.
Yeah,
that's obviously he thinks that that's not the right recipe, because what he did worked, and it worked very, very well. But he was a heavyweight on top. But at the same time, taking all those things away, he was active and he was out there. He sold out areas within New York, followed by the New England area, followed by the entire Northeast. And then he got on TV to where the whole country knew who he was. Then he won the heavyweight title, and the whole world knew who he was.
Yeah, then again, that's an exceptional case, but the point still stands. A lot of these dudes, but that's the thing though, a lot of these guys are being fast-tracked. They win their title, they have a title shot less than 10 fights or thereabouts, and then they only fight twice a year. So by the time they're done with their career, they're going to have, what, 30 fights? Less than 30 fights? I mean, it's a new thing that's going on that's very bizarre for those of us who have been watching the sport for a long time, and so we'll see what happens with that one, man. Chief, do we end it now?
I can hear the microwave going downstairs to reheat some stuff. So,
all right.
It doesn't matter. It means it's dinner time.
All right.
So,
all right. So Chief has been summoned, and we have to respect the Chieferinos, the Chief Stains here has to eat. So, fellas, I want to give a big shout out to everybody. First of all, give a big shout out to Boxing Chief for dropping by. Chief, thank you for being on, man. We'll talk behind the... Always, man. We'll talk behind the scenes to plan out the next show. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And hopefully everybody out there... Fantastic. And hopefully everybody else enjoyed it out there too. I'm talking about Ceylon, Mooney, Sean Rain, Double L, Super Saiyan. Who else we had here? Why isn't this thing moving? Come on, move. Oh, we need to move. Phil Miles, Matador. That's 2 Matador. Frank Bay. Shout out to Frank Bay, one of the initiated. Andreas is in there as well. Grim Reaper, B. Wayne, more BDC. Who else we had here? Hold on a second. B. Wayne. Did I mention Phil Miles? Hopefully GD Skeptic. Who else we had? John Locke is God. Barry Nivola. Jonathan Kidder. If I forgot anybody, it's because we gotta go, fellas. Hold on. James Burrell. Timmy. Shout out to you guys. Really appreciate it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. We'll catch you in the next one, fellas. Take it easy. Thanks for watching. This was another edition of Food TV. Shout out to the real Food TV, B. Wayne. And we'll be back soon.
My friend Logan.
Shout out to Logan. And we shall be back.